Chapter 1428. Wei Wei Bai faintly raised an eyebrow. So what? Gu Nanli's words paused and his eyes finally changed. He repeated each word. So what? Wei Wei Bai, yes, so what? If I die, I'll admit it. If I don't die, I'll succeed. I'll enjoy what I should enjoy. Why are you pointing fingers at my life? What does it have to do with you whether I'm in danger or not? Even my father didn't discipline me like this. When she said this, she gave a cold smile. Mr. Gu, you're really strange. Why are you so worried about my life or death? Is it just because I can sleep with you? Yes, why was he so worried about her life or death? Was it just to sleep? Gu Nanli finally couldn't lie to himself. No, he cared about her. He didn't know how much he cared about her, but when he saw her standing outside the boat, his palms began to sweat. He wasn't even this nervous when he faced so many bullets. But he was so nervous about whether a woman would fall into the sea or not. There were no sharks in the sea, so she wouldn't die. Why was he so nervous? Reason warned him, but it didn't work the first time. He still couldn't suppress his heart beating faster and his anger from being played by her. Ding, the male lead's affection has increased to 25. Wei Wei Bai, this affection is really dragging on. Can't it increase faster? Give me 100 to start with. Gu Nanli looked up at her for a while. Her short hair fluttered in the sea breeze. Her face was exquisite and beautiful, but this beauty was suppressing a coldness. This woman was never a daughter flower, nor was she a caged bird. He trapped her. No wonder she had nowhere to vent her anger. Gu Nanli's handsome face, in the darkness and light, had a cold and lonely feeling. His fingers clenched and his nails hurt a little. Suddenly, he walked forward step by step. All right, stop playing. Let's go back. Gu Nanli knew that she was resisting him, but he still wanted to hold on to her and not let her go. Debts must be repaid. She had lived a good life for him for so many years. Shouldn't she compensate him for the rest of her life? She had said it herself, you owe a favor, you owe a favor, you owe a life, you owe a life. She owed him half a lifetime of good times. For the rest of her life, she could only bitterly follow him and repay this debt. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed slightly. Don't come over, Gu Nanli. Gu Nanli said coldly, go ahead and jump. If you jump, it won't be difficult for me to pick you up. It was too childish to threaten him with this. Suddenly, there was a whooshing sound, followed by a boom. Fireworks exploded in the dark sky. Gu Nanli was distracted by this voice. Then, he saw Wei Wei Bai slowly reveal a happy smile. Was she that happy to see fireworks? Could it be that fireworks were beautiful? A strange feeling flashed through Gu Nanli's heart. Something was wrong. He suddenly looked up, only to see a flame rising into the sky from the port, followed by the sound of an explosion. Gu Nanli rushed to the railing, gripping it tightly with both hands as he looked fiercely at the port. Was it attacked? No, very few people knew about this port's business. There must be a spy who betrayed them. Gu Nanli reached for his phone, intending to direct the chaotic scene at the port, but his phone was gone. Wei Wei Bai's voice sounded calmly. How about this gift? Mr. Gu. Gu Nanli turned to look at her, only to see that she was holding his phone in her hand, smiling very happily. Chapter 1429. I took your phone from your pocket just now. I didn't expect you to be so careless. It was rare for him to be so unguarded when he was with her. Wei Wei Bai blinked. I'll return it to you. After that, she passed the phone to him, but her fingers trembled and she threw the phone into the sea. I was careless. Gu Nonli saw her looking at him pretentiously and finally asked, "What did you do?" Wei Wei Bai smiled brightly. "I betrayed you. Did you think that I couldn't find your study room even if I couldn't find the weapon? I've deciphered all your secret codes and confidential documents, so I've sent all your important business locations and secret smuggling routes to your opponent. Actually, it was all thanks to the system. She was just waiting to die while Tong Zi was in charge of monitoring Gu Nonli. She easily found out what business he had that couldn't see the light of day. Then, she let the system send all the information to Gu Nonli's opponents. He had just established his foundation and had many enemies. After knowing what business he had, of course, they would rush over to take revenge. From the beginning to the end, she was just a snitch. But it was enough to make Gu Nonli live a life worse than death for a while. Gu Nonli stared at Wei Wei Bai. His back was to the light, and his face was cold and emotionless in the dark. Those tender feelings disappeared. He looked at her as if he was looking at someone he met for the first time. It was full of judgment. "You've deciphered all of them." Wei Wei Bai looked calm. She lazily tucked her short hair behind her ear. "Why are you so surprised? I'm already very outstanding. If you keep me by your side, I can betray you at any time, stab you and take your life." There was no other way. He had the system's eyes. It was easy for her to find out. Gu Nonli's fingers gripped the railing. The veins on the back of his hands were bulging. His whole body was tense as he stared at the port in the distance. Then, he slowly closed his eyes. His breathing was extremely suppressed. Then, he opened his eyes again. His eyes were full of murderous intent. "Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" Traitors, informers, these kinds of people could only end up dead. Wei Wei Bai seemed to be stunned for a moment, and her smile froze for a moment. Gu Nonli took advantage of the fact that she was still in a daze to pounce on her. He reached out as fast as lightning and grabbed her wrist, dragging her up. Bai Wei Wei seemed to have long been prepared. She let go of the railing, and in her other hand, she held a table knife that she didn't know when, and resolutely stabbed into Gu Nonli's hand. The sharp part of the knife pierced into the back of his hand, and blood immediately gushed out. But his expression didn't change at all. He dragged her with great strength and was about to drag her over the railing. Blood flowed down Wei Wei Bai's hand. But Gu Nonli's eyes were fixed on her, ignoring his own wounds. His gaze was terrifying. It was not that he had never been betrayed before. It was not a big deal. The winner was king while the loser was in the wrong. It was only a matter of one life. But why was he so angry when she betrayed him? This kind of anger was too fierce and terrifying. It made him lose all rationality and only thought of revenge. How could she? How could she hate him so much? Gu Nonli felt that he had treated her well during this period of time. He even hid his identity from her because he was afraid that she would make a scene at the meeting. Did she not feel anything at all? Gu Nonli didn't even know how much grievance and unwillingness were mixed in his anger. It was like a young boy who didn't know how to love. He suddenly had his first love and messed up everything, but he still didn't admit it. He even took out his anger on the girl who made him fall in love. At this moment, he was scary and childish. She wanted him to live a life worse than death. He wouldn't let her run away as she wished and let her live a good life. Wei Wei Bai suddenly shouted coldly, "Let go of me, Gu Nonli." Gu Nonli sneered, "Dream on." The table knife in Wei Wei Bai's hand stabbed down even more fiercely. Gu Nonli held onto her back and was about to violently carry her in through the railing. But in the next moment, Wei Wei Bai pushed him away fiercely. He didn't let go of her hand, not letting her have her way. In the next second, a bullet had already shot between them. If Wei Wei Bai hadn't pushed him, this bullet would have taken his life. Gu Nonli's expression changed and he looked at her strangely. Why did she save him? Wei Wei Bai had already broken free from his wrist and jumped into the sea. Gu Nonli hurriedly leaned against the railing and stretched out his arm, but he couldn't grab hold of her clothes. When he saw her fall into the water, his mind was blank and buzzing. By the time he realized what was going on, he had already jumped into the sea and followed her in. A dirigible rapidly approached the place where Wei Wei Bai had fallen into the water and pulled Wei Wei Bai out of the water. Wei Wei Bai boarded the dirigible and slapped Bai Mu's face. She scolded coldly, "Who told you to kill Gu Nonli?" Bai Mu's face flushed red and he didn't dare to look at her. Wei Wei Bai was drenched in water and her expression was cold. Hurry up and leave. This is not a place to stay for long. The dirigible flew away quickly. The bodyguards on the dirigible also jumped down one after another to save their boss. Gu Nonli emerged from the water, his cold black eyes staring fixedly at Wei Wei Bai's rapidly departing figure. He stared for a long time and his voice actually softened. You can't bear for me to die, Wei Wei Bai. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 30. Chapter 1430. Wei Wei Bai happily ran away from Gu Nonli. Gu Nonli was also in a terrible fix because of many business locations and many technical secrets that had been leaked. Wei Wei Bai was too ruthless. She almost beat him down to leak the secrets. There were so many secrets, so many connections, business locations, and a bunch of high-level technologies that were seized with blood and fire. She simply leaked it out. Moreover, she even attracted Bai Mian's forces. During this period of time, not only did he have to deal with the underworld trying to seize power, but he also had to deal with the crisis of revenge. He also had to face several waves of police officers who were eyeing him covetously and wanted him dead. Gu Nonli's side had suffered huge losses, and many people had died. Now, the underworld was waiting for him to fall so that they could completely divide him up and eat him. Gu Nonli thought that he had locked up a bird, but in fact, it was a wolf with fangs like him. She stayed by his side for more than 2 months. Every day, she was plotting how to destroy him. This was truly a beautiful and frightening gift. Gu Nonli listened to his subordinates report the speed of the recent collapse of the industry. There was also a huge loss of connections. His face was quiet, his beautiful eyelashes drooping, and his eyes were covered with a layer of gray shadow, with a hint of cold death. It seemed that the subordinate's report did not cause much of a reaction from him. One of the more loyal subordinates braced himself and advised, "Mr. Gu, you'd better go to sleep. Your body can't take it." In fact, if he hadn't stayed by Wei Wei Bai's side for more than 2 months, Gu Nonli's body would have adjusted a little. Relying on his body's foundation that had been tormented for many years, he would probably collapse in more than half a month. In this half a month, he almost didn't sleep. If he closed his eyes, he would barely sleep for an hour or 2, but he would immediately wake up with nightmares. Recently, he even began to vomit blood. This was a protest of his body that couldn't take it. If he didn't sleep, even if he didn't have anything to do, he would still die. It was only because Gu Nonli had such a strong mind and a strong body that he could hold on for so long. Gu Nonli reached out and gently pressed on the top of his nose. His fingertips were white, but they were delicate and fragile. After so many days of torment, he had lost a lot of weight. Originally, he was young and had a delicate appearance. Now, he couldn't suppress his elegance, making people feel that he was too thin and clean. He didn't look like a bloody, cruel, and powerful leader at all. His voice was a little hoarse. "I can't sleep without her." Before he could finish his sentence, he was cut off. Gu Nonli remained silent for a while as if he was possessed. Only then did he regain his cool demeanor. "It's okay. I can still hold on. After all, what I want now is more than before. During this period of time, the number of assassinations had increased by several times. The speed at which his career was collapsing was so fast that he could not control it. Gu Nanli recalled Wei Wei Bai's cold expression before she jumped into the sea. He finally understood. Not only did she want to take revenge, but she also wanted to completely eradicate him. Only in this way could the Bai family gain survival space and further expand their power. And he was so careless in front of her, even too relaxed. He thought that if she lost the opportunity to hold a weapon, she would not be able to escape. He didn't expect that not only did she escape, but she also dragged him into the mud. Gu Nanli also knew why she wanted to force him to his death. Because only in this way would he not be able to catch her. He was now a thief who was thinking about her, and there was no way to guard against thieves for 1,000 days. She wanted to destroy him so that he would never have a chance to get close to her. It was a very rational, perfect, and even cruel plan. Chapter 1431. Gu Nanli suddenly felt a tightness in his chest. He covered his mouth with a handkerchief and coughed out a mouthful of phlegm that contained traces of blood. Overexerting one's health was not a good sign. The subordinate was shocked. "Doctor, quickly call the doctor." Gu Nanli looked at him indifferently. His eyes were cold and filled with anger. "I won't die. Don't be so flustered." The people under him started to panic and couldn't keep their cool. It wasn't just his health problem. The crisis they were facing had never been so serious. It was natural for people to be anxious. Gu Nanli sighed. He reached out to support his chin and slowly closed his eyes. He could still hold on and control the people under him. If he suddenly fainted one day, they would probably take revenge on Wei Wei Bai. Because of this huge crisis, the people under him hated Wei Wei Bai to the core. How could he not be anxious and angry in his heart? However, he still couldn't give the order to assassinate her. She stunned him too much. She also entangled with him too much. He couldn't bear to destroy her so easily. That was why he suppressed the resentment of his subordinates and didn't let them find trouble with her. Gu Nanli closed his eyes and thought. Suddenly, he fell asleep. He leaned against the chair and maintained the posture of supporting his chin. There was a dark green under his eyes. The subordinates immediately didn't dare to say anything. They carefully retreated, afraid that they would disturb his rare sleep. If they didn't sleep, they would probably hold a funeral for Gu Nanli. Gu Nanli didn't have nightmares. It could even be said that it was a beautiful dream. He saw Bai Weiwei, bored to death, using a small brush to brush her lip gloss with a pout. The light red color of the lipstick was very beautiful. Although Gu Nanli didn't understand why women were so passionate about these things, after looking at it for a long time, he felt that it was quite pleasing to the eye. Wei Wei Bai noticed him and looked up at him lazily. She suddenly waved her hand casually. "Gu Era, this is the most popular lip gloss color. Do you think it looks good?" Gu Nanli didn't get angry when he heard Gu Era call him that. He smiled. "It looks good." Wei Wei Bai looked at him in surprise. "You changed. I thought you would say that this thing poisoned me." "Gu Nanli, it does look like poisoning." Bai Weiwei's face was full of ridicule. "Sure enough, you're a straight man of steel. A man like you will never get a wife in your life." Gu Nanli was already in front of her. She took the small brush from her hand and looked at her quietly for a while before saying softly, "You're not the one who was poisoned. It's me." After he finished speaking, he kissed her. It smelled like lip gloss. It was fruity. It's ding. Ding ding ding. Ding. The male lead's favorability has increased to 35. Gu Nanli suddenly woke up. His heart was filled with a gentle feeling of joy, but he saw that he was sitting in a chair and there was nothing around him. The happiness that came from the dream turned cold just like that. His eyes were clear. He looked at the time and saw that he had already slept for 3 hours. It was hard to get good quality sleep. Gu Nonli said helplessly, I really was poisoned. Wei Wei Bai was feeding the dog. Hearing the notification of the favorability increase, she asked the system strangely. Gu Nonli is happy from being tortured. During this time, Gu Nonli must have been tortured to death. She was prepared for his favorability to drop back to 20. She didn't think that Gu Nonli would mysteriously increase his favorability. The system was frog-hopping. It was full from eating snacks and was digesting them. Your Shao air has become fatty air. I thought you forgot about the strategy. Transmigration system, male god, come here, /transmigration system, male god, come here, /transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time. If you like transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 1432. By Wei Wei, I'm waiting for Gu Nonli to go bankrupt, be hunted down, and fall into a miserable situation. Then I'll wait for him to be so miserable that he can only pick up leftovers from the trash can to eat. Then I'll go and redeem him. The favorability will definitely rise. Oh. System, if the male lead really falls into that state, he'll probably die together with the host. When that time comes, it'll be the one to save the host. Wei Wei Bai, how's Gu Nonli's progress now? System, struggling bitterly, seeking victory in the midst of danger. The male lead's luck was very good after all. When other people were so unlucky, they would probably become a beggar hunted down like Wei Wei Bai hoped. Only Gu Nonli could still hold on and did not really fail. Wei Wei Bai, he's so good at holding on. I've already sold him everything, but he still hasn't been defeated. What's his bank password? I'll take all his money. The system was shocked. Host, although I know you're evil, immoral, and have no bottom line. You deserve to be fried in hell, but I still underestimated the extent of your lack of bottom line. She even stole the bank password. This was even more shameless than selling her body. Wei Wei Bai, the system had not been sharp-tongued for a long time. Why was it not used to hearing it? Wei Wei Bai tried for a long time but still could not get the password. She walked out of the door a little regretfully. After all, Gu Nonli was a little more miserable, but the initiative was in her hands. She was miserable in so many worlds. This world was for her to conquer for a lifetime. She really wished that Gu Nonli was really a beggar. Then, he could only please her. That way, she would be able to gain favorability without any worries and live a good life. Of course, it was just a thought. A man like Gu Nonli. So cunning and smart. If she was not careful, she would probably be chopped into pieces and die without knowing how. Wei Wei Bai sighed. When would there be a world where the target was a silly and sweet person? It would be best if it was the kind that was stupid to the point of being retarded. Wei Wei Bai even said to the system, why aren't there any retarded targets? The system said, don't make random wishes. What if a retard really comes? Wei Wei Bai, it's easy to fool a retard. The system said, retards have incontinence, drool when eating, and don't flush the toilet. Wei Wei Bai, he definitely couldn't tolerate not flushing the toilet. She suddenly felt that Gu Nonli was much more pleasing to the eye. At least he didn't drool when eating. Wei Wei Bai was waiting for Gu Nonli's downfall while dealing with the Bai family's business. Now, the people in the underworld were swarming to attack Gu Nonli. Instead, she was ignored. This made it less obvious when she quietly changed her name. Today, because of a certain Lotus's plot of land, she needed to meet with a real estate tycoon, the kind that was purely business. Wei Wei Bai carried Xiao'er into the car. After a few months of growth, he had turned from a little husky into a Chinibyu husky. Although it was still relatively small in size, it was already quite heavy. Because he had grown up, his retarded face became even more retarded. Wei Wei Bai didn't mind. When she got out of the car, she specifically asked Bai Mu to take care of the dog. Bai Mu's ability to take care of dogs was top-notch. He didn't procrastinate when dealing with matters and was very loyal. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai had gotten used to using him and didn't replace him for the time being. The location of the date was a golf course, which was also the most famous club for the rich. When she entered the club, she didn't see the real estate tycoon. Instead, it was the tycoon's son. The rich second generation still looked very young. When he saw Wei Wei Bai, he immediately walked over attentively. Crossover system, Prince Charming, come over here. /crossover system, Prince Charming, come over here / crossover system, Prince Charming, come over here. Download crossover system, Prince Charming, come over here. Crossover system, Prince Charming, come over here. Chapter 1433. Hello Miss Bai, I'm Sun Zixing. My father has to attend an emergency meeting, so he can't come. I'm very sorry. He reached out and shook Wei Wei Bai's hand. I'm here on behalf of my father. I hope you don't mind. Wei Wei Bai shook his hand politely and smiled gently. How could I mind? Mr. Sun, you're joking. Sun Zixing was young and handsome. He was rich and used to being flattered. He was also a playboy. But when he saw Wei Wei Bai, he was still stunned. When he saw the photo, he thought it was photoshopped. He didn't expect that the real person was even more beautiful than the photo. Wei Wei Bai tried to pull her hand back, but found that he was holding it tightly. A trace of disdain flashed through her eyes. Sun Zixing reacted and blushed. He immediately let go of her hand and said awkwardly, then let's first. What do you want to drink? I'll get someone to bring it over. After all, the contract needs to be considered and it will take a long time. Wei Wei Bai said, water is fine. Don't be so nervous. I won't eat you. She looked at him generously. The mole at the corner of her eye was even more exquisite. Sun Zixing was used to seeing beauties in the entertainment industry, but he was still defeated by her simple gaze. He immediately took a few steps back and turned to leave like a young boy. Wei Wei Bai was very calm. The system was also very calm. Wei Wei Bai and the system didn't pay much attention to the reactions of passers-by. Suddenly, the system sensed something. It looked back and saw a glass screen. And behind the glass screen, a familiar and elegant figure appeared. This was Wei Wei Bai's blind spot and couldn't see. But the person behind the screen could see Wei Wei Bai. It was careless and didn't notice the male lead. It immediately reminded her, the male lead is behind the screen on your left. He's looking at you. Wei Wei Bai's face was calm. Don't worry about him. As long as he's not here to kill me, don't bother. Before Gu Nonli suffered enough, she would not go near him. Why did she approach him? Gu Nonli was probably fuming right now and wanted to kill her. Now was the time when Gu Nonli was at his most ferocious. Was she going to deliver herself to him for him to bite? Therefore, she pretended not to see Gu Nonli. She also prayed hard that Gu Nonli's opponent was strong enough to make Gu Nonli lose everything quickly so that she could pick up the scraps later. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai turned around and walked out very calmly. It was impossible for Gu Nonli to follow them at this time. He couldn't even protect himself, so it was definitely not worth it for him to come out now. However, before she could take more than 2 steps, a hand was already gently placed on her shoulder. It was not a strong hand, but the fingers were too cold, causing her skin to turn cold. Wei Wei Bai frowned and reached out to grab the hand on her shoulder. However, before she could turn around, another hand clasped her waist and pulled her into a familiar embrace. The man hugged her and intimately stuck to her hair, his breathing a little messy. Wei Wei, we haven't seen each other for half a month. Did you miss me? Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened and she sneered, of course I missed you. I was thinking about when you would fall so that I could benefit. Gu Nanli's face was a little pale, and there was a hint of fatigue on her face. There were dark circles under her eyes. He leaned his head lazily on her shoulder. His face was a little thin, which made it look even more exquisite. Your gift kept me busy for a period of time, but it's almost over. Once I'm done with this busy period of time, I'll go and pick you up. Because he was tired, his words were a little lazy, and his hoarse voice sounded deep and sexy. However, the words he said made one's back tingle. After I pick you up this time, I won't let you escape. His pale lips curled into a cold smile. You really make me worry. Wei Wei Bai lowered her eyes and said indifferently, Gu Nanli, if you don't let go, I'll kill you. Her hand was holding a small pistol, which was already pressed against his waist. Gu Nanli was silent for a while before he slowly let go of her. Wei Wei Bai did not let her guard down. Instead, she took a few steps back before turning around to face him. Gu Nanli stood by the screen. He was wearing a white shirt and black pants. His black hair covered his eyes and he was as pale as a vampire in the dark night. Wei Wei Bai looked at him warily. You still want to lock me up? You don't have the strength now. During this period of time, he was like a stray dog. He was just short of falling. Gu Nanli smiled and did not say anything, but his eyes were looking at her greedily. Sun Zixing walked over with a glass of water and saw this tense scene. He stood beside Wei Wei Bai and looked at Gu Nanli strangely. What's wrong? Just as he asked, a hand was placed on his shoulder. Wei Wei Bai said calmly, Gu Nanli, this is my fiancé. He's young and handsome, and he's a super rich second-generation heir. I'll have to rely on him if I want to change my image. It's impossible between you and me, so don't stick to me like a plaster. Sun Zixing and the system were speechless. The host's brainstorm was too fast. What should they do? Gu Nanli was silent for a while before he said slowly, Are you sure this soft-footed shrimp can satisfy you? Wei Wei Bai said quickly, Do you think you're tough? The scene was quiet. Very quiet. The slash. Chapter 1434. Wei Wei Bai felt that it was too damn quiet and couldn't help but break the awkward atmosphere. When I say hard, I don't mean hard. It means strong and cute, you guys understand right? After saying that, the scene became even quieter. They didn't understand, but they also understood what was going on. The scene was still too awkward and silent. On the contrary, Gu Nanli couldn't help but smile. His gloomy and pale face gained a bit of vitality. He sighed softly with a hint of affection. I understand. Then he slowly walked in front of Sun Zixing and sized him up with his cold eyes, as if he was weighing something. When everyone thought that he was going to greet him, he suddenly grabbed Sun Zixing's arm and twisted it fiercely. The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Sun Zixing's face immediately turned pale. He opened his mouth wide in pain, as if he wanted to call for help. Gu Nanli's expression was incomparably calm. His other hand grabbed Sun Zixing's neck and lifted him up, slamming him into the glass window. Sun Zixing was in so much pain that he couldn't even make a sound. He could only turn red and tremble. Gu Nanli's voice was soft and gentle, this is my woman, do you understand? A trace of fear appeared in Sun Zixing's eyes. His body wanted to struggle, but he couldn't. In front of him, Sun Zixing was a pitiful little lamb. Gu Nanli's eyes were a bit bloodshot. It was unknown whether it was caused by lack of sleep or jealousy. Wei Weibai frowned. Enough, Gu Nanli, do you have to destroy my opportunity to cooperate? When Sun Zixing heard Wei Weibai's voice, he couldn't help but look at her with a hint of pleading for help. Gu Nanli calmly said, if you look at her again, I will gouge out your eyeballs. These words were so cruel that it made people tremble. Sun Zixing immediately didn't dare to look. He was so scared. Papa, save me. Gu Nanli coldly looked at Sun Zixing before letting go of his fingers. This pitiful man's legs had already softened and he sat down on the floor. He turned to look at Wei Weibai. Fiancé. Don't say such things that will cause me to misunderstand in the future. What kind of cooperation is this? As long as I'm here, it's useless for you to work with anyone. His presence alone could ruin any perfect cooperation plan she had. The blurred charm in Bai Weiwei's eyes disappeared. Instead, they were filled with mocking anger. Step by step, she walked in front of Gu Nanli and raised her head to look at him. She reached out and gently touched his face. Why are you so skinny? She didn't seem to care about him at all. Gu Nanli couldn't help but answer, I've been busy recently. Wei Weibai smiled. What's wrong? Are you busy running for your life, Gu Nanli? Her fingertips had already brushed against his cheek, and a faint red mark appeared on his cheek. You want to stop me with your current appearance? I'll cooperate with whoever I want. Can't you just quietly be a stinky rock in the corner and not come out to block my path? Her words sank, filled with anger that was difficult to suppress. My father is dead, and the Bai family has no intention of fighting with you in the underworld. If you let me go, won't everyone be happy? It was only 35 points of favorability, but she was already so possessive. Wei Weibai couldn't help but say to the system, if I get to 100 points of favorability in the future, Gu Nanli won't turn black, right? The system couldn't help but remind her, he won't turn black. Without waiting for her to relax, the system said, he's already black, there's no way he can get any blacker. By Wei Wei. At the /crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com. Download Transmigration system, Adonis, come here and read this on your phone, https://m/sashu.com//. Chapter 1435. The system comforted her, don't be afraid. At most, he'll just make a cage to lock you up. Doesn't he want to rear a bird? A method of rearing birds with 100 favorable impression points is definitely a golden cage. Wei Weibai, this way of comforting was too scary. Gu Nanli's eyes were dark. His pale face revealed a gentle smile, everyone is happy. He chewed on these 4 words calmly. Then he reached out and grabbed her fingers. Her nails were painted with a certain brand's light pink nail polish. It was not as dazzling as red, but it had a restrained freshness. Her original nail color was still better. Gu Nanli suddenly said, do you know? I learned some common knowledge about nail polish colors. He was under a lot of pressure recently. The way to relieve his stress was to mail many nail polish brands and then study them one by one. His subordinates thought that he was starting to have schizophrenia due to lack of sleep. For example, he started to like women's things. Maybe one day, they would think that they would wear women's clothing and become perverts. But Gu Nanli only did it because she liked it. He could actually relieve his stress by studying the things that she liked. He really cared about her. Wei Weibai said coldly, why? Are you planning to enter the makeup industry after going bankrupt? It's easy to earn money from women. Remember to inform me when you start a company. I will take care of your business often. Her words were full of sarcasm. She did not give him any face. Gu Nanli did not reply. He had not seen her for a while. When he saw her today, he could not help but want to take a few more glances. He could even ignore her cold and sarcastic words. Actually, it was not suitable for him to show up today. Even his coming here was a secret. But when he saw her with a man, he lost control of his calm and rational mind and walked out. Gu Nanli looked at the time and realized that it was about time. He turned around and looked at the person behind the screen. They were here to discuss matters today. They had just finished talking. It was time to go back. Gu Nanli couldn't help but hold her fingers and kiss her nails. His eyes were gloomy and had a trace of strange heat, which made his beautiful eyes look a little evil. Next time, don't provoke me like this. He was like a barrel of gunpowder now. If she continued to provoke him like this, he could only settle the score with her. Wei Wei Bai took a few steps back with a cold expression on her face. Then she said, Gu Nanli, you'd better take care of yourself. The winner takes all. You don't have a chance anymore. Gu Nanli saw that his subordinate had already come over and was holding his coat. His subordinate came over to help him put on his coat. Gu Nanli was also expressionless. After putting on his suit jacket, he returned to his usual cold and serious self. I'm leaving. Take care of yourself during this period of time. After all, you owe me, and I'm still waiting to get back at you. She had caused him to lose so much by leaking information. He couldn't let her go. As for what she was going to use to pay him back, it was all up to him. Gu Nanli turned around and was about to leave when he suddenly stopped in his tracks. Wei Wei Bai had already silently raised her gun, as if she had been waiting for him to turn around for a long time. Gu Nanli's heart raced a few times. His breathing became hot. Wei Wei, you really make me unable to be careless. Waiting for him to turn around before raising her gun to kill him. She clearly couldn't bear to see him die. Yet, she could still raise her gun so coldly at him. Wei Wei Bai sighed. Gu Nanli, originally, I didn't intend to take your life on account that you have a good figure and have slept with you a few times. But looking at you, once you turn around, you will take revenge on me. I'm afraid. To read the ad https://www.sashu.com/ to read at https://www.sashu.com to read at https://www.sashu.com to read at https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 1436. Her voice was cold and indifferent. Her words were heart-wrenching. Although it's almost impossible for you to make a comeback, but what if? She was rational and cruel. She did not have a trace of a woman's soft sensibility. You only brought 1 or 2 people today and did not bring a gun. You were too careless. This is a good opportunity to kill. Wei Wei Bai's cold red lips curled into a smile. So I'm sorry. I think a dead person will not make a comeback. If I kill you, I won't be afraid that you will come and catch me. Gu Nanli's breathing became heavy. His eyes were bloodshot and burning excitement appeared. How could she be so cute? She actually wanted to kill him so simply and crudely. Gu Nanli's gloomy mood for many days was driven crazy by her. His fingers slowly clenched. His cold fingertips pressed against the flesh of his palm as if he wanted to grab something. The subordinate beside him said calmly, Mr. Gu, you have to go. The commotion they caused was too big. Gu Nonli should not have appeared today. It was too dangerous. This was too unlike him. Gu Nonli nodded faintly. Then, ignoring Wei Wei Bai's gun behind him, he walked out directly. Wei Wei Bai's eyes narrowed dangerously. Her finger was about to pull the trigger. Bang! A bullet suddenly brushed past her hair and hit the glass window behind her. A crack appeared on the bulletproof glass. Wei Wei Bai's finger froze. It was a sniper. It was no wonder that Gu Nonli was not afraid at all. The snipers around him were the best form of protection. When Gu Nonli walked out, he looked at her sideways with a smile in his eyes. He said softly, "You still have a lot to learn, Wei Wei." Wei Wei Bai put away her gun. She reached out and tucked her hair behind her ear expressionlessly. The system said, favorability will not increase. Such a confrontation, such a state of mutual hostility. The host actually thought that the favorability would increase. The system said that this was probably a misjudgment. It even told her about the existence of the sniper, so she decided to shoot anyway. Could their favorability really increase by killing each other like this? He wasn't a masochist. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 40. Wei Wei Bai was as calm as the wind. Gu Nonli is a combination of a masochist and a masochist. If I don't have a love-hate relationship with him, how can I increase my favorability? She did not see how excited he was when she killed him just now. This kind of pervert was trying to win her affectionate heart. Could it be that she really wanted to win him over until the end of time, until she died of old age? To put it bluntly, Gu Nonli's emotional threshold was too high. This kind of man had to be tormented to death and arouse all of his emotions. Hatred, anger, joy, and sorrow. Only then would his feelings fluctuate. Once his feelings fluctuated, there would be a chance for his favorability to increase. However, no matter how well they got along with each other, he wouldn't have too many feelings for them. To put it bluntly, he was an emotional sloth. He would feel uncomfortable if he didn't draw. Wei Wei Bai put away her gun. What a scam. Although I know that a lifetime strategy will definitely give me a difficult strategy target, this kind of man is too tormenting. The main system just couldn't bear to see her live a peaceful life. After Wei Wei Bai finished lamenting, she remembered the important matter. Then she lowered her head to look at the stunned Sun Zixing. She half squatted down and reached out to pull him. Sun Zixing trembled and looked at her with a bit of fear. Wei Wei Bai smiled gently. That was just a small accident. Mr. Sun, let's continue to talk about the cooperation. Sun Zixing forced himself to speak with a trembling voice. We don't do things like forcing people to buy and sell. I won't marry you. Transmigration system, male god, come here. /transmigration system, male god, come here / transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here, comma. Chapter 1437. That man just now was too scary. If he dared to get too close to Wei Wei Bai, he would be killed. Because the sniper bullet brushed past Wei Wei Bai's hair and passed through the glass beside his head. This was a blatant warning, wasn't it? Wei Wei Bai's smile stiffened. I'm not marrying you either. It's not right for you to be such a coward. The coward Sun Zhe was furious. I'm not working with you anymore. Wei Wei Bai nodded faintly. Suddenly, he pulled out his gun and hit the glass. The glass window, which had already cracked earlier, shattered with such a heavy blow. Bai Weiwei smiled kindly. Say it again, do you want to sign your name on the cooperation agreement? Today's contract was for building materials. The price was very good. As long as he signed, he couldn't go back on his word. Sun Zixing cried. He was only here to discuss a normal materials contract. He snatched this task because he saw a beautiful woman in the photo. In the end, he entered a bandit's den. The man was cruel, and the woman was cruel too. He wanted to go home and save his life. Sun Zixing endured the humiliation and cried. I'll sign it. Don't kill me. Wei Wei Bai smiled kindly. Mr. Sun, what are you talking about? I'm a law-abiding citizen. It's good for us to do business happily. Gu Nanli got into the car and the car drove away smoothly. A gray-haired man sat beside him. Is that your little bird? Gu Nanli closed his eyes tiredly and didn't say anything. The gray-haired man disagreed. Gu, you shouldn't have walked out just now. Although I know that you Eastern men value a woman's chastity, it's not as important as your life. Gu Nanli was in a very dangerous situation now. If he wasn't careful, he would lose everything. Their meeting behind the screen was an absolute secret. Gu Nanli finally opened his eyes. There was cold sweat on his forehead. It was caused by too much excitement. His body had been rather weak recently, causing him to not be in a good condition. Gu Nanli said calmly, It's fine. No one thought that I could work with you, Cici. The gray-haired man smiled. Are you planning to kill him? When we were in school, we talked about working together, but I didn't expect it to happen so soon. Gu Nanli was expressionless. After this is over, I will help you kill your brother. A deep killing intent flashed in Cici's eyes. It's fine. Take your time. I really enjoy the carnival of climbing up the ranks. Suddenly, he laughed again. But the little bird you like is really pretty, especially when she wants to kill you with a gun. Gu Nanli suddenly looked up at him. His pale and cold face was delicate and ruthless. I don't like you talking about her so frivolously. Cici's cheeky smile disappeared. He shook his head. Gu, you look very serious. Gu Nanli didn't answer. He just closed his eyes indifferently. Cici asked carefully, Do you really like her that much? Like her? Do I like her? He didn't quite understand this feeling. Just when Cici thought that Gu Nanli had fallen asleep, he suddenly heard the man's hoarse voice. I don't know. I just think she's very cute. It was true. Very cute. From her toes to her hair, from her lips to her eyes, she was so cute that he couldn't help but want to grab her. Was this liking her? He didn't know. Cici repeated, She's so cute. Gu Nanli said, If you mention her again, I'll beat you to death. Cici, such strong jealousy. If this wasn't liking her, then what was it? The download text is at https://www.sashu.com//. The Chapter 1438. Wei Wei Bai received the construction materials, and with the various benefits given by Gu Nanli, the construction of the entire land finally started. All the documents were prepared, and the construction team and the team of architects were already stationed. Wei Wei Bai was busy for a while. After confirming that the project was successfully started, she felt a sense of accomplishment and went to see what Gu Nanli was doing recently. Gu Nanli was becoming more and more low-key, and those who wanted to take revenge on him had almost taken over his territory. Many people were now frantically looking for Gu Nanli, planning to kill him once and for all. The more power Gu Nanli had before, the more people he had offended. Now, anyone who had anything to do with Gu Nanli would die a horrible death. The methods of the underworld were frighteningly cruel. Fortunately, when Wei Wei Bai was locked up by Gu Nanli, whether it was by Mu or Gu Nanli, they did not say anything. She was well protected. Almost no one knew that she had been with Gu Nonli for a while. It was obvious that the two of them had a grudge. Now, there were many people in the underworld who had a grudge against Gu Nonli, and there were many who had interest disputes with him. Wei Wei Bai was not eye-catching at all. The Bai family's business was gradually transforming. As long as the project was successful, Wei Wei Bai would receive a crucial sum of money after the transformation, and she would be able to gain a foothold and smoothly wash away all of Bai Qi's shameful wealth. Wei Wei Bai did not want to be so busy, but she was a person who planned ahead. She had a lifetime to live, and if she did not have a career, how could she buy shoes, clothes, cosmetics, travel, and eat good food? Life was too beautiful, and it all needed money. When she was free, Wei Wei Bai asked the system, "Does Gu Nonli have any plans to turn things around now?" The system looked at the few melon seeds left in its hand, and it ate a little, afraid that it would finish them all. He could only blame himself for eating too much earlier. His 15 HP was about to be depleted. He made a deal with the Atlan family. Because you revealed all of his trump cards, he had no choice but to start anew. Wei Wei Bai flipped through the information on the Atlan family. They were involved in both legal and illegal activities. Their jewelry industry was world-renowned, and they were number one in the electronics manufacturing industry. They were also involved in all kinds of livelihood. Anyway, they were making a lot of money. But all this money had a dark shadow. Arms manufacturing, deep products, smuggling, all kinds of terrible deals in the dark world were made in the dark places behind this family. The internal strife of this family was also very tragic. The two most important factions were the legitimate successor, Villiard Atlan, and his illegitimate brother, CCE Atlan. The two factions fought each other to the death. As for Gu Nonli, he was good friends with CCE. Ever since they were in university, the two of them had been in the same dormitory and had been through life and death together. Gu Nonli had saved CCE many times. Although to Gu Nonli, this was just an investment. But it was obvious that CCE had high hopes for Gu Nonli. It was no wonder that he had not fallen and still had some connections even after she had exposed all of his secrets. He could still turn things around, and even return to the top. Wei Wei Bai felt that it would take many years to defeat Gu Nonli. She could not keep revealing secrets. After all, once was fine, but twice and thrice were secrets that could not be revealed. Gu Nonli was not an idiot. How could he not know that she had some kind of cheat code? She would not reveal the existence of the system. Even if it was just a hint, she would not let anyone find out that she had 004. Therefore, the cheat code had to be used carefully. In this dimension, her ability to dismantle weapons, and the first time she had exposed all of Gu Nonli's secrets. ////// Chapter 1439. It was already eye-catching enough. If she continued to cheat, Wei Wei Bai helplessly lit the cigarette, then elegantly took a puff and said, "I have to protect you, Tongzi." The system was so safe because no one had discovered it. If she was too demonic and inhuman, then the chances of Tongzi being exposed would be higher. That was why she could not let her abilities exceed her limits by too much, and she could not directly use the system's information after obtaining it. The first time she did this to Gu Nonli was the limit. If she did it again, she would not have any way to hide the source of the leaked information. Although it was a poor and crippled system, but to the people of the normal plane, this kind of treasure that could monitor any corner at any time, anywhere. It was practically a god-level weapon. Who would not want her to be able to be like a fish in water in the conquering plane? It was because the system was almost omniscient. Except for the side mission. That deceitful system was related to her, they were not biological siblings, and it was also the secret of her parents having an affair. The system did not reveal anything at all. She had long guessed that the system actually knew about the side mission, but it just could not say. She did not want to make things difficult for it. Who asked her to be such a cute, perfect, kind, and pure super good host? The system suddenly said faintly, "Your expression is a little strange. Are you thinking of some evil plan to destroy the human race?" Wei Bai, the system said, "Your expression is even scarier. Are you thinking of silencing me?" Wei Bai took a puff of the cigarette. "If you continue to blabber, I will put you into the meat grinder and flush the toilet, Tongzi." She could not be friendly to it for even a second. She might as well cheat it of its application form and change the channel again. The system was silent, then it said, "Smoking is bad for your health. If you continue to smoke, I will add feces-flavored chocolate into your cigarette." Wei Bai said, "I said it's mint leaves, you have to believe me." The system said, "All right, then I will add more mint-flavored feces for you." Wei Bai did not dare to whip anymore. The mint-flavored poop was too vicious. She couldn't even tell if the mint she was smoking was made of poop or poop. She thought that it would be cooler to come to a big sister's dimension. Trash system, ruining my cool image. I'm doing this for your own good. Wei Bai, ah. The system said, "Smoking is harmful to your health." Wei Bai finally knelt down. "Are you a repeater?" "Father, I was wrong. Please don't repeat this sentence." Hee. Wei Bai said, "I actually want to ask, how many years would it take to destroy Gu Nanli? Can you measure it?" The system replied, "Impossible." Wei Bai, you can't even measure the time. Can't you just give me a date to encourage me? The system replied, "I'm saying that you can't defeat him." Wei Bai was confused. Why? If it wasn't for the appearance of the Atlanta family, she would have defeated him already. The system said, "He is blessed with providence." Although providence can't elevate a person to the status of a god, it can guarantee that he won't fall into hell. If it wasn't for Wei Bai, with Yi Yuxuan's status, he could do whatever he wanted in any dimension. Male lead, male lead, male lead, male lead, male lead. Was that a joke? It had never called Wei Bai the female lead. That was because her providence was so weak. If it wasn't for exploiting Yi Yuxuan's providence, she might not even be alive. The Transmigration System, Adonis, come here, / the Transmigration System, Adonis, come here, / Transmigration System, Adonis, come here. The Transmigration System, Adonis, come here. To make it easier for you to read next time, you can click Save below to record this reading record. Transmigration System, Adonis, come here. Chapter 1440. This also led to Wei Bai exploiting and abusing Yi Yuxuan. It was very calm because Yi Yuxuan would not be in trouble. However, once something happened to Wei Bai, it would tremble in fear. If something happened to her, it would really happen and it would be impossible to save her. Was it easy for it to worry about this old father? Wei Bai said, "Look." The system tried to explain, but it could not understand. So it simply said, "Even if you take out all the money in his bank account to buy nail polish and sell all his resources, he will not collapse. Because he has no money, he may encounter a super big business opportunity and become rich overnight. When he runs out of resources, a super big benefactor will appear and he will be reborn." Luck was that good. It was also very desperate. Who asked him to be the master of this realm? If he had not awakened, would he be abused by Wei Bai like this? Wei Bai said, "Then my wish of him becoming a beggar and picking up spoiled food from the trash can can't come true." The system said, "If you can look forward to yourself becoming a beggar and picking up spoiled food from the trash can, this wish can come true anytime." Wei Bai's face was full of despair. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" If she knew that Gu Nonli would not collapse, she would not have been so ruthless. Now Gu Nonli was probably suppressing the flames of revenge in his heart. Once he returned to his peak, it would be strange if he did not drag out this traitor and torture her. She thought that after she destroyed him, he could only rely on her. Did she not see that she was working hard to earn money? It was to support Gu Nonli, who was destined to be poor in the future. The system said, "You were the one who wanted to leak it." Wei Wei Bai said, "You can stop me." The system said, "You were the one who wanted to torment. Didn't you say that a life without torment is not perfect? You are perfect now." Wei Wei Bai was speechless. Although she was indeed perfect, he still felt a little embarrassed to say it out loud. While Wei Wei Bai and the system were having their daily, friendly communication, an invitation suddenly shoved both of them up at the same time. It was an invitation from the Atlan family. To be precise, it was an invitation from CCE Atlan. It was said that this illegitimate son of a prominent family just happened to pass by this city and toured his family's property. He planned to find a local tycoon to do business with. He would have full authority to handle all of Atlanta's local businesses. Everyone cheered up. In fact, if Gu Nonli hadn't kept a low profile during this period of time, this contract would probably have been Gu Nonli's. Now, all the powers were rejoicing that they had suppressed Gu Nonli. As a result, everyone could get this rare opportunity. After all, Atlanta's businesses were spread all over the world. It would be very easy for a family to take off if they could get on this line. CC was one of Atlanta's most valued successors. He was also the one with the strongest influence. Sucking up to him was a shortcut to the upper echelons. Therefore, this rare and glittering banquet was basically a diamond-studded death trap. Wei Wei Bai asked, "Do you want to go?" The system replied, "Your character setting will go." If Wei Wei Bai wanted to change her name, the Atlan family's business was one of the best channels. Therefore, in terms of character setting, Wei Wei Bai had to go. The prerequisite was that Wei Wei Bai didn't know that Gu Nonli had a relationship with Atlanta. Did Wei Wei Bai know? Even if she did, she could only pretend not to know. Wei Wei Bai took out another cigarette. It was a slender and beautiful woman's cigarette. She said softly, "At this point, there's no way to change the strategy. We can only fight Gu Nonli to the end." Download the at https://sashu.com// to make it easier for you to read it next time. You can click Save at the bottom to record this chapter. Crossover system, Adonis, come here, comma. Chapter 1441. The system silently ate a melon seed. What should it do if it finished? Wei Wei Bai said, "If it's a trap, I'll probably be tied up and chopped into pieces by Gu Nonli, or hung up and cut into 1,000 pieces." The system finished eating the melon seed and looked at the empty bag. Life was gloomy after eating it. Wei Wei Bai said, "I can only seek victory in the midst of danger and farm some favorability points when I'm being tortured." The system finally said, "I added poop-flavored chocolate in your cigarette just now." The cigarette in Wei Wei Bai's mouth. She slowly removed it and held her breath. She did not smell anything. Nothing. Wei Wei Bai wore a blue sleeveless evening gown and walked into the hotel with a light-colored petal-shaped bag. The Atlan family had a great reputation. If it was not a banquet, then it would be inviting people from the underworld. There would probably be more famous people from all walks of life. Wei Wei Bai walked into the wolf's den calmly. The hotel was fully booked and decorated with gold and jade. The food and drinks were all top-notch, and the service was top-notch as well. Wei Wei Bai had a good mentality. She could not avoid it. She wanted to be tortured and farm favorability points during torture. That was her strength. How miserable was she? She was tortured to the point where she felt superior. Therefore, the following plot was Gu Nonli returning to his peak. She could not resist being captured and tortured. Then, she would try her best not to die in such a miserable situation. The foundation of her character was already laid. Unless she really got into a car accident and caused herself to lose her memory and become retarded. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been so nice to Gu Nonli. The system said, "The male lead is looking at you." Wei Wei Bai remained calm. "Where?" The system said, "In the surveillance room." Wei Wei Bai said calmly, "Oh." As long as he did not suddenly appear behind her, nothing would be a problem. When the banquet started, everyone gathered together. Bai Weiwei held a tall, slender wine glass filled with champagne. She leaned elegantly and casually in a corner, observing others. In the monitoring room, there was also a pair of tired and bloodshot eyes, but they were still beautiful, staring intently at her. She seemed to have sensed something. Her eyelashes trembled as she lazily raised her eyelids. The ends of her long and charming eyes curled up, bringing out a beautiful arc. The camera was too hidden, so she couldn't find anything strange. She took another sip of wine. In the monitoring room, Gu Nonli looked at her expressionlessly. His eyes rested on her moist lips for a few seconds before he looked away. He said to the subordinate beside him, "Don't hurt her by accident later." The subordinate immediately replied, "It won't hurt, Miss Bai." Gu Nonli rested his chin on his hand and sighed. His tone was calm and cold. "I really want to catch her quickly." The people around him quietly stood around him, not daring to make a sound. Gu Nonli had not slept for more than an hour in a month. At this time, Gu Nonli's emotions were very cruel and violent. After the death of a few tactless people, the subordinates were very quiet and didn't dare to provoke him. Wei Wei Bai finished her wine and found that the people around her were all rushing in the same direction. She looked over and saw a tall man in a silver-gray suit walking over. His gray hair was not short and was tied up with a black hairband. He was a very typical handsome Western man. He had a high nose and thin lips. His eyes were also gray. It was Cici. Because he was not the target of the strategy, Wei Wei Bai lost interest after a glance. As for Gu Nonli, who was in the monitoring room, her gaze softened a little as she stared at her. // Chapter 1442. Cici raised his glass naturally and said a series of pleasantries. Then, he finally said what everyone wanted to hear the most. "Because I've been at home for a long time, and my main focus is on my country, I need a business partner here. I've been staying here all this time to find this partner," Cici said with a smile. His eyes swept over where Wei Wei Bai was standing, and his polite expression became more sincere and friendly. Everyone was a smart person, so how could they not see this kind of expression? Everyone looked at Wei Wei Bai in an uproar. His gaze was like a knife, stabbing into her body with a swish. After all, the Bai family was not powerful enough now. Bai Qi was dead, and Wei Wei Bai barely supported the Bai family. It was already impressive that the Bai family did not collapse. But to snatch the big cake that was the Atlan family, the Bai family was not qualified. If Wei Wei Bai really took this big business deal, from tomorrow onwards, everyone would go against Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai did not seem to notice the murderous aura. She had just picked up a new glass of champagne and blinked innocently. She did not seem to know why everyone was looking at her. Cici maintained his smile. "This business partner has just arrived. Let me introduce him to you." The guests with ulterior motives had just turned their attention back to Cici when the sudden change caught them off guard. The service staff next to him suddenly grabbed a guest's neck and pointed a gun with a silencer at the guest's head. With a bang, blood splattered everywhere. Cici held the glass in his hand and took a sip elegantly. He smiled warmly as he watched everything happen. Wei Wei Bai and the system, the guests in the hall were killed in an instant before they could react. Those who reacted in time were shot in the head by a sniper as soon as they pulled out their guns. Cici looked at Wei Wei Bai and sighed. What a beautiful night, isn't it? Wei Wei Bai held the glass in her hand and was silent. The system said, when you came, did you know that these people would be shot in the head? Wei Wei Bai said, I thought that no matter how arrogant they were, they would only detain them, and then let them go or lock them up depending on the situation. Who knew that such a tomato-like scene would happen? It was a massacre. The system said, the male lead is here. Wei Wei Bai, it feels like the Grim Reaper is here. She looked up and saw a man walking down the stairs slowly. She saw a man walking down the stairs. He did not make an arrogant entrance, but simply. He was wearing a simple formal black suit and a white shirt. His figure was a little thin, but it made him look more elegant and slender. Gu Nanli's steps were steady and relaxed, as if she was strolling in an ordinary garden. Her expression was indifferent and calm. There was no trace of killing intent. Gunshots were still ringing out one after another. The sniper's carnival and the waiter's blood feast. The flowers and blood from the banquet merged into a red and gorgeous carpet. A bullet even went to Wei Wei Bai's side and hit right beside her feet. Wei Wei Bai frowned and took a few steps back. Just as she was about to turn and run, a pair of cold and pale hands landed heavily on her smooth shoulders. She could not move as if she was caught by the claws of a ferocious bird. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath and gritted her teeth. Gu Nanli, you're working with the Atlan family. Gu Nanli's hoarse voice was heard. Not only am I working with them, but I'm also working with many people you don't know. You haven't done enough to destroy me. The guests invited to the banquet were almost all dead. A few fresh corpses were still twitching. Wei Wei Bai was still holding the glass in her hand. She gripped it so hard that her fingernails turned white. So you invited us here for revenge. The guests who came tonight all had a grudge against Gu Nanli. Especially those who had trampled on Gu Nanli recently. They died the earliest. Gu Nanli's face was already pressed against her neck. His breath was hot and heavy. He chuckled softly. Then she heard him whisper to her like a demon. Revenge, no. This is just a cage for catching birds. They're all bait. Business contracts, snatching guests, and Atlan's sweet cookies. They were all bait and sweets. It was just to let her, who was cunning and careful, step into this beautiful and bloody cage. He smelled the familiar fragrance on her body. His hand was already holding her waist. His whole body was pressed against her, and his tall figure loomed over her. Wei Wei Bai sneered. Why? Are you keeping me alive and not killing me? Are you waiting to torture me? After all, I'm the one who almost killed you. Gu Nanli did not say anything. He hugged her quietly and buried his face in her shoulder. His soft short hair rubbed against her skin. Wei Wei. His voice was gentle, but the woman in his arms was even stiffer. The banquet finally quieted down. Blood and corpses were everywhere. His faint and tired voice murmured in her ear, I'm sleepy. I want you to sleep with me. He was very sleepy. He couldn't sleep without her. Save button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 1443. After Gu Nanli said that he was sleepy, he did not go to sleep immediately. Tonight was destined to be a bloody and cruel night. Anyway, those who had a grudge against Gu Nanli, those who had tried to harm his interests, and those who had tried to assassinate him. They would all be dealt with in the time of the banquet. Although it sounded rough and simple, it was necessary to prepare for this banquet. Gu Nonli did not know how much time and effort he had spent to get here step by step. During this time, if he had made a single mistake, he could have been consigned to eternal damnation. Therefore, he was more tired than ever. His hand was still cold as it caressed her shoulder. Slowly, he used his calloused hand to caress the exposed skin of her back and her slender white neck. This kind of contact was too rough. It made Wei Wei Bai's body extremely tense. Her fingers slowly touched her thighs. Guns were not allowed at the banquet. No, it should be said that no weapons were allowed. However, many people did not listen to this rule and secretly brought weapons in. The people who had died in the end had all brought weapons. And because they trusted the Atlan family too much, they did not bring weapons and were shot in the head. Wei Wei Bai did not bring a gun. She brought a military knife, which was extremely sharp and pressed against the skin of her thighs. The cold blade made her eyes clear and sharp. Just as she pulled out the knife and was about to stick it to her palm, she heard a voice coming from behind her. Gu Nonli sighed behind her. You really make me unable to be careless. Just as he finished speaking, his hand had already firmly clasped her fingers and ruthlessly snatched the knife away from her. Then, he bent her hands behind his back and pinned them behind his waist, completely suppressing her. Wei Wei Bai only felt pain in her arms and numbness, but her bones were fine. Gu Nonli was very considerate. You can take care of the things after this. Look for me in 2 days. Unless something happens in between that time, I have to appear. After Gu Nonli finished speaking indifferently, he untied his tie with one hand and tied her restless hands tightly. Her fingers struggled until they turned red. But his eyes were abnormally calm and repressed. His fingers skillfully and forcefully tied her up little by little. The knot on the necktie was meticulously done. There was no possibility of him breaking free at all. After Gu Nonli tied her up, he grabbed her waist and pulled her into his arms. He carried her in a princess carry and strode forward. Cici took a sip of wine and said with a smile, I wish you a good night, little bird. Wei Wei Bai was tightly held in Gu Nonli's arms. She didn't see Cici's teasing smile, but she heard his teasing words. When Gu Nonli walked to his side, he suddenly kicked him in the stomach. Cici's expression changed. He dropped the wine glass in his hand and reached out to block his foot. Gu Nonli's kick was too strong. It made his fingers numb and the pain made him frown. Gu, do you want to kill me? This kick landed squarely on his stomach, and he would probably vomit out his dinner on the ground. Gu Nonli said, I said, if you dare to say anything bad about her, I'll kill you. He could call her little bird. No one else could. Cici saw the ruthlessness in his eyes. He immediately retreated. I'll clean up your mess for you. After saying that, he fled in a hurry. A man who didn't sleep was scary. A man who was in love for the first time was even scarier. Gu Nonli stuffed Wei Wei Bai into the car and ordered the driver, go to the Bai family's mansion. For the https://www.sashu.com/4 at https://www.sashu.com for at https://www.sashu.com for at https://m.sashu.com for the full text. Chapter 1444. When Wei Wei Bai heard this, she finally did not struggle. Instead, she shrunk into a corner of the car, her short hair a little messy and sticking to her face. Why are you going to my house? The fatigue in Gu Nonli's eyes was obvious. He reached out and rubbed his eyes. To kill. His tone was incomparably calm, as if he was talking about what tonight's dinner was. Wei Wei Bai's pupils shrank. She said, Gu Nonli, haven't you killed enough people tonight? You've killed so many people, you'll suffer an unimaginable counterattack. Because Gu Nonli tore open his tie, the buttons were also undone, revealing his fragile collarbone and an overly pale neck. His appearance was cold and delicate. With his hair scattered, he looked like a noble young master with a sense of youth. If it wasn't for his usual pressure, anyone who saw him like this would not be able to help but look down on him. Gu Nonli used this appearance that made people look down on him. His voice was a little hoarse from exhaustion. This world is very dark. It's just a matter of life and death. I dare to kill like this because I'm the victor. He suddenly reached out, wanting to touch her. Wei Wei Bai turned her face to the side, looking at him with eyes full of killing intent. Gu Nonli's fingers stiffened for a moment before he retracted them. Wei Wei, I won tonight. So what if the remaining stray dogs want to kill me? Just like you, I'm going to kill your whole family now and destroy everything that Bai Qi left for you. He slowly revealed a devilish smile. What can you do? Back then, you revealed everything about me and watched coldly from behind the scenes as I was hunted down. You even added fuel to the fire to make me fall. I remember all of that. These were all things that he had to pay back. So many lives. So many losses of wealth. So many narrow escapes. She really wanted him to die. If someone else had treated him like this, they would have died miserably at the banquet just now. She was the only one who could impulsively confront him like a wolf cub. Looking into his cold and cruel eyes, Wei Wei Bai bit her red lips. Her eyes were filled with killing intent as she suppressed her anger. I'm willing to accept my loss. It's my failure that I didn't kill you. You can torture me however you want, but there are a few old people in the Bai family who didn't participate in the matters of the underworld. I promise to take care of them in their old age. Don't touch them. The Bai family did not only have these old people. There were also some relatives of the Bai family. Although they were distant relatives, they had done a lot for the Bai family. With Wei Wei Bai's character, using these people to threaten her was indeed effective. Gu Nonli looked at her with gloomy eyes and smiled. This month, I wanted to kill someone every day. The number of times I wanted to kill you is the most, but when I see you, I can't bear to, so I can only kill someone else. No one could survive after betraying him. She was special. Gu Nonli had never denied this. He didn't know anything about love. He only knew that he had to fight for whatever he wanted. If he couldn't bear to, he would hold on to it. If he was tired of it, he would destroy it. He still couldn't bear to part with her. Gu Nonli's breathing deepened. He closed his eyes and said, I wanted to treat you better, but you didn't want to. I need to take revenge. So many people have died on my side. It's not right if I don't take revenge. So many people had died. He knew very well that his subordinates hated Wei Wei Bai to the core. But he could suppress them. No one dared to do anything to her. And he killed her entire family just to vent his anger. Chapter 1445. After Gu Nonli finished speaking, she hid her face in her arms with a cold expression. Then, she took off her jacket and draped it over her. He looked at the chauffeur. The chauffeur had dead fish eyes. He didn't look at the rearview mirror at all, so he pretended that he didn't know anything. He didn't want to have his eyes gouged out and be buried in cement as construction material by Mr. Gu. Wei Wei Bai was confused and asked the system, so did I succeed in seducing him or not? The system looked at the empty bag of snacks and said bitterly, did you succeed? Did you succeed? Did you succeed? I've finished all my snacks. Wei Wei Bai, 15 days of life points were eaten just like that. Finished just like that. How many months had it been? You wastrel, I asked you to buy food and you actually went to eat snacks. Before Wei Wei Bai could grab the system's neck and question it, Gu Nanli's voice sounded. Go home. He wasn't going to the Bai family, but going home. So he was still persuaded by her and didn't kill her whole family. The driver immediately turned the steering wheel quickly, turned the car around, and stepped on the accelerator, rushing home at top speed. Gu Nanli's new house was in the old district of the old city. The houses here were all like courtyards with a deep and winding feeling. Gu Nanli carried Wei Wei Bai through the door and walked past the beautiful but Chinese-style bridges and corridors. The house had a modern style. She was placed on the bed by Gu Nanli. Then, Gu Nanli got up very calmly. He looked at her from afar with reddened eyes. She seemed a little nervous and didn't hide the murderous intent in her eyes. Even seducing him was not a good idea. But she had stirred up all his manly feelings. Gu Nanli turned around to calm his surging emotions. He found that it was useless and his forehead was sweating. Suddenly he heard the sound of her getting out of bed. Gu Nanli turned around almost immediately, only to see that Wei Wei Bai had already fled. She ran to the door, but because her hands were tied, she couldn't open the door. She kicked at it with her feet, but found that she couldn't open it. Gu Nanli felt a headache coming on because of her anger. Halfway through her seduction, she planned to run away. For the sake of the Bai family, shouldn't she be flexible? If I yield, I'll only yield half. Did he think that he wouldn't have to pay the bill just because he didn't kill anyone? Gu Nanli stretched out his long legs, aggressively trying to catch her. Wei Wei Bai found that the door could not be opened, so she ran directly to the bathroom. Gu Nanli was one step slower, but before his fingers could touch her dress, the bathroom door was slammed shut. Gu Nanli's breathing was heavy and his eyes were sinister. Wei Wei Bai, come out. She was playing with him again. She had clearly seduced him just now, and he had tacitly agreed that she had succeeded. But the moment she thought that he wouldn't kill anyone, she actually slammed the door in his face. Wei Wei Bai's voice slowly came from the other side of the door. I feel that there's something wrong with you. Let's calm down and have another beautiful encounter. It wasn't that she was a coward. After all, things had already come to this point, and it wasn't that she was being unreasonable. But the way Gu Nanli looked just now, he was obviously a serial killer. He looked like he was about to kill someone at any time. Wei Wei Bai felt that it was better to let him calm down before continuing with the seduction. She was afraid that he would be impulsive and strangle her on the bed. After all, Gu Nanli had indeed been living a tough life recently. Address of the full article, https://www.sashu. Com address of the Chapter 1446. She even added fuel to the fire, wishing that he would become a beggar in the next second. In the end, the trashy system ruined her dreams, forcing her to face the unbeatable and even more powerful Gu Nanli. Gu Nanli stood there for a long time before his expression finally returned to normal, but his eyes were even darker and more terrifying. He walked to the window unhurriedly and drew the curtains. Then, he turned on a few more lights that he didn't usually use, making the room even brighter. Then, he came to the door and politely knocked on it, saying to her, I've calmed down, you can come out. As he spoke, he unbuttoned one button after another. He took off his white shirt, revealing his fair and strong upper body. Under the light, those scars had a kind of incomplete beauty like a sacrifice. Wei Wei Bai's voice had a hint of a lazy smile. Mr. Gu, I'm taking a shower, you can wait for a while. Shower my ass, her hands were tied so tightly. If he didn't help her untie it, she wouldn't be able to untie it herself without tools. Gu Nanli slowly exhaled, telling himself to calm down, calm down. Then, he suddenly raised his leg and viciously kicked the door. The door shook a few times, but the quality was too good to be kicked open. Gu Nanli's face was expressionless, but his body was surging with a violent and crazy anger. This was the various dark and negative emotions that he had been suppressing in his body during this period of time. He wanted to kill. He wanted to kill her even more. Every time he was in pain, he thought so. But every time he really saw her, he couldn't bear to do it. This kind of contradictory feeling was very unbearable. This kind of unbearable irritation turned into the strength to kick the door. The door that was almost impossible to kick open finally couldn't take it under his explosive strength. The door cracked and the lock was kicked open. Gu Nanli's leg was a little numb, but this was nothing to him. He smoothly retracted his leg in the air and swung his ankle at the same time. This made his blood flow faster, and the numbness quickly disappeared. Then, he pushed open the broken lock and slowly walked in. It was like a huge shadow shrouding the yellowish bathroom. Wei Wei Bai sat on the edge of the bathtub. There were red marks on her wrists. She seemed to be trying to untie the tie but failed. She stared at him blankly. It was as if they couldn't understand how someone could kick open such a high-quality door. Wei Wei Bai saw him walking over slowly. There was even a hint of a smile on his face. It was terrifyingly gentle. Wei Wei Bai, Tongzi, there's really something wrong with Gu Nanli. Will I be buried? The system said, where am I? Who am I? Where are you, my little snack? The system was already surrounded by an army of bullet screens. The bullet screen army changed from being rich and powerful and democratic to pineapple crisps, dried bananas, dried kiwis, raisins, and sunflower seeds. The system had never felt so hopeless before. Not only did the bullet screen kill people, but it also hurt the heart. Why did it have to provoke it when it couldn't eat it? And it even came with pictures. The comments on the bullet screen escalated. Wei Wei Bai couldn't hear the system's voice, but he was already in front of her. He asked her kindly, do you want to take a bath? I'll fill the tub for you. There was no need for her to answer. Gu Nanli's rationality had already shattered into pieces. He put her in the bathtub and filled the tub with water. His actions were very forceful, and his strength was unusually rough. Wei Wei Bai was quickly soaked in water. In the dense steam, her clothes stuck to her graceful body. Her beautiful skirt floated like a gauze, and her delicate skin was faintly discernible in the steam. Quick transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. 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 Download the at https://m/sashu.com button at the bottom to record this chapter. Quick transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. Chapter 1447. Then, the doctor looked at Wei Wei Bai's face for a while, but he did not dare to touch it. Although he studied Western medicine, his family had been traditional Chinese medicine for generations, so he still knew how to look, listen, question, and feel the pulse. He said, you don't have enough kidney energy, young man. Don't overdo it. Wei Wei Bai could tell that it was caused by a large loss of energy in a short period of time. It was easy for her to recover after resting. As long as she did not overdo it and paid attention to her health, young people would be healthy soon. Therefore, he did not have to worry that she would suddenly fall to the ground and die. The doctor spoke with trepidation. But for the sake of their bodies, he still had to brace himself and say it. Otherwise, it would be his fault if something bad really happened. Doctors these days were fireproof, burglary, and medical disputes. Medical disputes by people like Gu Nanli were fatal. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while, then said, "Is the kidney energy deficiency temporary?" The doctor said, "Abstain for a while, and you'll be back." Wei Wei Bai thought, this is not good news. She thought that Gu Nonli had erectile dysfunction. She was about to set off firecrackers to celebrate, but it was only temporary. The system said, "So you're the legendary couple with kidney deficiency." Wei Wei Bai, who was lying on the bed like a half-paralyzed, looked at the unconscious Gu Nonli, and finally said, "More like a paralyzed enemy." After a night of torment, no one gained anything. No, she did gain 5 favorable impression points, but she was still unable to calm down her wounded heart and ravaged body. Wei Wei Bai lay on the bed for 2 days before she could finally get up. That night, Gu Nonli really wanted to kill her. So he did not hold back. Her skin was now covered with scary bruises, as if she had been subjected to domestic violence. Gu Nonli also woke up a few times. When he slept, as long as he had a little consciousness, he would hold Wei Wei Bai's hand tightly. Only then could he sleep. For the past 2 days, they were both paralyzed on the bed. Therefore, he slept well in the same bed. But when Wei Wei Bai recovered a little, she didn't want to lie in bed anymore. After all, if a person were to lie down for too long, their bones would become paralyzed. However, Gu Nonli still needed to lie down. His kidney deficiency was much more serious than hers. This kidney deficiency was caused by long-term insomnia. Therefore, he had to sleep. He had to sleep enough and sleep well so that his body could recover. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai's current life consisted of eating and sleeping with Gu Nonli. Eating and sleeping with Gu Nonli. In the end, Wei Wei Bai looked dazed. Who am I? Where am I? Why would I sleep with a man with weak kidneys? Was she here to conquer him or to sleep with him? It was one thing for him to sleep with her, but it didn't even increase his favorability. After spending so much time in the game, he only managed to get 50 favorable impression points. If he wanted to get 100 favorable impression points, he would have to wait until he was 70 or 80, right? Gu Nonli, this man with weak kidneys, was too difficult to conquer. Wei Wei Bai complained as she ate. She played with her phone that couldn't connect to the internet with one hand and accompanied Gu Nonli to sleep. Gu Nonli occasionally looked up at her in a daze. His body gradually recovered. In addition to a small amount of nutritious meals and high-quality sleep, his weakened body condition was reversed. Every time he woke up and saw her face, he would heave a sigh of relief. His anxious heart would also calm down. Gu Nonli thought that he wouldn't have nightmares, because she was by his side. But for some reason, he suddenly fell into a sudden nightmare. Endless darkness, a suffocating swamp, and Gu Buddha's crazy and twisted face. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the Chapter 1448. The endless cycle of nightmares kept pulling him down. Gu Nonli's whole body trembled and he couldn't breathe. In the dream, he seemed to be a helpless child who had nothing and could only be slaughtered. Gu Buddha's fingers were tightly clutching his neck. He kept questioning why he wasn't dead yet. Why wasn't he dead yet? Gu Nonli bit his lips. His fingers were trembling. His fingertips were empty. There was nothing. Where was she? Where was her hand? Almost as if he was frightened, he immediately opened his eyes. His face was full of cold sweat, and his eyes were filled with fear. Where was Wei Wei Bai? Why wasn't she by his side? When he woke up, he was lying on his side. This was the direction where Wei Wei Bai was sleeping. But the pillow beside him was empty, and the hand that he was supposed to be holding on tightly to her was empty. Did she escape? Gu Nonli suddenly sat up. His black hair was messy, and his eyes were anxious and crazy. Wei Wei Bai. He was almost gnashing his teeth, hiding his suppressed hatred. Yes. An indifferent and lazy response sounded like the sound of nature. Gu Nanli's body stiffened. He turned his head to look at the window, but he saw a beautiful figure leaning against the window. The curtains were pulled up. Beside the mahogany window frame, she looked at him indifferently and lazily. Her posture was as soft as water, as if she had no bones. Bai Weiwei's face was expressionless. The lady's cigarette in her fingers was burning with smoke, making her fingers look like white jade in the mist. What's wrong? Can't sleep again. Weiwei Bai sneered. Baby boy, you don't even dare to sleep alone. How pitiful. Gu Nanli didn't say anything. He just stared at her. The fear of being killed by the nightmare just now was appeased by her faint gaze. The light by the window shone on her hair. Every irritable nerve in his body was magically quiet and comfortable. It was as if he had been saved. Gu Nanli calmed his breathing and then moved his hands and feet. Sleeping for too long had caused his limbs to feel numb. He quickly moved himself to relieve the stiffness in his body. Then, he got off the bed. His footsteps were a little shaky. Weiwei Bai looked at him coldly as if she was looking at a stranger. This kind of gaze made him feel stifled, but it was better than her resentful and angry gaze. When he had almost tortured her to death on the bed, the image of her breaking down and cursing him, even saying that she hated him, was still vivid in his mind. Gu Nanli walked in front of her and suddenly reached out to grab her, pulling her into his embrace. But in the next second, he felt a burning pain on the back of his hand. Gu Nanli's grip on her did not change. He did not even tremble. Bai Weiwei unhurriedly pressed the cigarette in her hand against the back of his hand. His skin was burned by the flames. Gu Nanli just asked indifferently, "Are you still angry?" Weiwei Bai put out the cigarette and pushed him away. "When are you going to let me out?" Her voice was very calm, and there were no fluctuations in it. Gu Nanli smiled. His face was still a little pale, and his voice was a little hoarse. "I don't know." Weiwei Bai looked at him coldly. Gu Nanli repeated, "I don't know. I don't know when I can let you go." He did have a different kind of feeling for her, a feeling that was different from others. But he was not sure what kind of feeling it was. Because he had no kinship, no friendship, and even no love. He had no experience in this area. Address of the full article, https://www.sashu.com. Address of the Chapter 1449. Even CC was just an object that he could use. Only Weiwei Bai was different from them. He couldn't bear for her to die, and he couldn't bear for her to hate him. He couldn't bear to let her go. What kind of feeling was this? Gu Nanli's expression was a bit blank, but his hand was very strong as he grabbed her arm. Weiwei, a person has to accept defeat when they're willing to bet. You know the rules. You lost to me, so it's only right for me to treat you however I want. If she wasn't so special to him. The things she did were enough for him to kill her dozens of times. Weiwei Bai was silent for a while before saying coldly, "I'd rather you kill me than keep me in captivity." Gu Nanli's expression was blank for a moment, then he returned to normal and said, "I can't kill you. I've tried." Such straightforward words made Weiwei Bai speechless for a while. He said it so simply and without hiding anything. He deserved to not be able to get girls. At this time, he should cry and shout, "No, I like you. How can I bear to kill you? Just thinking about it makes me feel guilty." Only such words could be used to pick up girls. Gu Nanli was simply a straight dog among the single dogs. He was like an iron wall that didn't know how to flirt. It would be good if he could apply for a change of target. Wei Wei Bai sighed. How did she end up with a man who didn't even know how to tell a few sweet lies? Gu Nonli saw the bruises on her wrist, and his gaze stopped at the back of her neck. The intense kiss marks and bite marks had not faded. It was too intense, too rough. It had been a few days, but the wounds on her body had not healed yet. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, "What, do you want to do it again? Mr. Weak Kidney." During this time, his kidney was weak, so he was fine no matter how she teased him. Because he couldn't. The doctor had said that with Gu Nonli's weak foundation, it would be impossible for him to do such intense and terrifying exercise again in a short period of time. Of course, after a period of recuperation, he would be able to have sex. Unfortunately, now was not the time. It would take at least 1 or 2 months for his body to be in a stable state. After so many planes, this was the first time Wei Wei Bai had met a man with kidney deficiency. Even in the eunuch's dimension, he wasn't a real eunuch, and he didn't have kidney deficiency. He was not even comparable to a eunuch. Gu Nonli's lowered eyelashes trembled a few times. There was a hint of annoyance in his eyes, but he suppressed it and didn't let Wei Wei Bai see it. His voice was much gentler. "Does it still hurt?" Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. "I deserve it. I asked for it, didn't I?" Such sarcastic words were pleasing to Gu Nonli's ears. At least she couldn't learn those suicidal tricks. Even in such a situation, she was still full of vitality. Gu Nonli heaved a sigh of relief, then tried to negotiate with her. "Just stay by my side. I'll still give you those conditions, and I won't touch the Bai family, as long as you don't leave." Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment, as if she was thinking about what he meant. Gu Nonli's voice was incomparably calm. "Wei Wei, you can't escape. You should stay by my side. I can give you a limited amount of freedom and give you everything you want, as long as you obey me." These conditions were very good. Gu Nonli felt that he had shown her the greatest kindness. He didn't know what kind of feelings he had for her. But there was hatred, and there was definitely love. Sometimes, when he looked at her, it was as if he was looking at his nightmares. Their identities were exchanged, and she was living a life of luxury. Chapter 1450. Yet, he had to face death at any moment every single day and struggle at death's door. That was why he hated her. But every time he could fall asleep with her in his arms, he almost didn't dare to admit that he actually felt moved. Her existence was his salvation. Love and hate, madness and gentleness coexisted. He poured all his feelings into her, and he couldn't afford to lose. Before he was tired of her, he didn't dare to let go. She was the first person he wanted to have. Bai Wei Wei coldly sized him up a few times. Her eyes were calm, without hatred, let alone love. She was very rational, so rational that she was strong. Limited freedom, what kind of freedom? Gu Nonli's heart felt uncomfortable, and it was suffocating bit by bit. She was no different from doing business. She didn't even have a trace of emotion. Gu Nonli suddenly realized that she didn't hate him because she really didn't have any feelings for him. This realization made him immediately maintain his cold expression. He didn't want her to see his emotions change. "You can go out, but you have to follow bodyguards. You can contact the Bai family, but you have to get my permission. You can continue your business, but the people you use and the resources you want have to go through my hands." It wasn't freedom at all. It was like a cage. The golden cage of Golden Canary was just like that. Gu Nonli saw that her expression had turned cold, and she seemed to be very dissatisfied. He finally couldn't suppress the uncomfortable feeling in his heart. "You should be satisfied. If you don't accept it, I'll really build a cage and lock you in." Wei Wei Bai immediately pursed her lips and suppressed her dissatisfaction. But her calm and cold eyes finally showed an expression of irritation. Gu Nonli looked at her for a while and didn't say anything. The servant outside the door politely knocked on the door. It seemed that she was here to deliver the medicine. Gu Nonli was silent for a few seconds before letting go of her wrist and lying back on the bed. The servant took the tray and carefully handed the medicine bowl to Gu Nonli. "Mr. Gu, drink it while it's hot." Gu Nonli waved his hand and dismissed the servant. Then, he calmly drank the medicine. It was extremely bitter, but it didn't make him frown. Although Gu Nonli had been sleeping most of the time these days, he would occasionally wake up and see that Wei Wei Bai hated these traditional Chinese medicines. Even if he had to drink it, he had to have a bunch of sweet things to suppress the root of his tongue. She was afraid of hardship, just like a child. When Gu Nonli thought of this, he couldn't help but laugh. Wei Wei Bai looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot. He smiled and said, "Come here for a moment, I thought of something very funny." Wei Wei Bai's face was cold and indifferent. Gu Nonli repeated, "Come here." His tone was heavy, and an icy pressure appeared. Wei Wei Bai paused and then reluctantly walked to the bedside. However, Gu Nonli drank the last mouthful of medicine. It was the most bitter mouthful, and most people wouldn't drink it. After he put it in his mouth, he quickly pulled her into his arms and held the back of her neck. He lowered his head and kissed her. He poured this mouthful of medicine into her mouth. Wei Wei Bai froze and her face turned ugly. She looked disgusted and tried to push Gu Nonli away with all her might. However, he maliciously pressed down on her lips and stirred her mouth, forcing her to swallow all the medicine. It was one of the top 10 tortures. Wei Wei Bai felt that her tongue was about to explode. The taste of the medicine was so bad that it could make people commit suicide. Gu Nonli's mouth was full of bitterness, but he didn't feel anything. However, she was about to suffocate. No one would feed medicine like this. This was murder. Gu Nonli let go of her and then took a sweet from the plate beside the table and stuffed it into his mouth. Such a sweet thing wasn't as tasty as Chinese medicine. However, Wei Wei Bai liked it because she also drank his medicine. Every time, she needed candy to drink it with a bitter face. How could a person who wasn't afraid of a rain of bullets be so embarrassed by a bowl of medicine? It was so cute. Wei Wei Bai was held in his arms and couldn't break free. Her mouth was full of bitterness. She frowned. "Gu Nonli." Gu Nonli lowered his head and kissed her. There was the bitterness of the medicine in his mouth, but more of it was the sweetness. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but take the initiative to suck, as if she was taking the initiative to ask for a kiss. Gu Nonli chuckled. His mood was much better. A lot. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 55. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on Chapter 1451. Cici brought a pile of documents for Gu Nonli to deal with. He said, "It hasn't been very peaceful here recently. Take some effort to deal with it yourself." "I'm going back to China." Gu Nonli said indifferently, "Remember to leave half of your men behind." Cici said, "That's right. You do need to be careful recently. Many people want your life." Gu Nonli stopped writing and looked up coldly. "It's not for me." Cici immediately understood. "Oh, for your little bird." Gu Nonli threw the pen in his hand at him fiercely, almost throwing a chair. Cici raised his hands in surrender. "Okay, I won't talk about her anymore. I also understand that you've never had a woman before, so you became an excited little boy when you fell in love for the first time." Gu Nonli took another pen. "She hasn't been very happy recently." He had no choice. It wasn't appropriate to discuss this kind of thing with anyone. Cici had changed a lot of women, and all of them loved him to death. So Gu Nonli put down his pride and reluctantly asked him. Cici said, "What does she like? Just give it to her." Gu Nonli paused for a moment before saying, "She wants freedom." Cici touched his chin helplessly. "Why don't you let her go first, and then go after her obediently? Otherwise, you can't lock her up for the rest of her life." Gu Nonli said calmly, "I can." "Cici," Gu Nonli repeated, "with my current strength, I can lock her up for the rest of her life." Now that the forces that had offended him in the underworld were almost eradicated, he was the real power now, and he was even more glorious than Bai Qi. Those dark businesses that made money in the underworld were also in his hands. As long as the assassination didn't succeed, it was almost impossible to defeat him. As for Wei Wei Bai, her hands and feet were completely bound by him. Unless she could escape overseas to develop her power, there was no possibility for her to develop her own business in his territory. Unless he gave up his authority. Cici spread out his hands. "All right, bro, I don't want to nag you, but love can't be created by being locked up. You have to have confidence in yourself. Look at you. You're handsome and rich. Other than being a bit of a loner, you don't have any other faults. If you let go and chase after her, you'll definitely be able to catch up. Then, you won't have to worry about her running away. She'll definitely fall in love with you." Gu Nonli was stunned. "Fall in love with me?" There was a rare hint of hesitation in his tone. "What if she still doesn't love me?" Cici laughed. "How is that possible? You're a good man. There aren't many men as good as you these days. Women are all snobbish. They'll like you when they see you." He had never seen a woman who didn't love a man who was rich, handsome, and clean. Gu Nonli was practically a prince who walked out of a high-quality idol drama. Of course, this prince had a dark background and wasn't very good at pleasing women. Gu Nonli was silent for a long time before frowning slightly. "What if there's a 1% chance that I'm not the type she likes? What should I do?" "Cici, let's part on good terms. Feelings can't be forced. If you love her, give her your blessings, bro." Gu Nonli was stunned for a while before saying, "Then I'd better lock her up." Cici's smile froze, ? Gu Nonli lowered his head indifferently and continued to sign. "At least I'll get her body 100%. If I have to let her go for her heart, I won't get anything in the end if she runs away. Such a loss-making business. He wouldn't do that. The. You'll see it the next time you open the bookshelf. If you liked the. Chapter 1452. Even if he locked her up, at least she was still his. What he cared about was practical benefits, not the illusory future. Cici hesitated for a moment. "If you lock her up for too long, aren't you afraid that she'll turn against you?" Gu Nonli said, "It's okay. She hates me enough now." Cici, looking at Gu Nonli, who was extremely calm and even took it for granted, Cici said helplessly, "Okay, as long as you're happy. But I need to sort out my people and pick out some people who can't be used before I can give them to you." His brother's spies were mixed in with his people. He and Gu Nonli knew about these spies. If they were to give people to Gu Nonli, then there wouldn't be a problem. Giving people to Wei Wei Bai wouldn't work. He could only use his most loyal people. After all, in addition to protecting Wei Wei Bai, they were also her jailers. Gu Nonli took care of things and walked into the living room. He stopped in his tracks and saw Wei Wei Bai lying on the sofa lazily looking at the nail polish bottles. She looked lazy and her eyes were blurred with a hint of tiredness. She hid her willful side. After being locked up, she stayed obediently, but she didn't have the energy to patronize him. Gu Nanli stared at the slightly exposed shoulder blades on her back. They were fair and delicate. Her beautiful neck was flawless. Her short hair was a little longer and covered half of her neck. She was like a lazy and noble big cat, neither cold nor warm when she saw him. She dared to neglect him because she knew that he would keep his promise not to touch her family. Gu Nanli thought that if he couldn't stand her coldness one day and threatened her with the things she cared about, would she pretend to be more friendly to him? She probably would. She had always been cunning and didn't care much about her face. Gu Nanli was just thinking about it and didn't intend to do it. Wei Wei Bai seemed to notice him and turned to look at him. Then she averted her gaze and rested her chin on her hand as she counted the nail polish bottles. Gu Nanli slowly walked to her side and sat down. He reached out and touched her back. She was wearing a thin, low-necked dress. Separated by a layer of fine fabric, his rough and calloused fingers rubbed against her body, almost as if he was touching her skin. "Do you want to go out for a walk?" If she could pull herself together, he would go with her. Wei Wei Bai said coldly, "No need." "Gu Nanli, do you want to go to work?" Wei Wei Bai looked indifferent. "Working for you?" "Not going." Gu Nanli hesitated for a moment. "Are you going home?" Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a moment before looking up at him lazily. "Sure." Gu Nanli pursed his lips and tried to bargain. "You have to do something to make me happy before I can let you get what you want. Weren't all other people's mistresses like this?" Actually, he didn't really see her as a plaything. He wouldn't let others call her mistress in front of her. But he didn't know where to place her. He just didn't want to let go. And he hoped that she would take the initiative to get close to him. Wei Wei Bai heard his words and sneered. "Why? How do you want to be happy? Do you want to have weak kidneys again?" His body hadn't recovered for a few days and his brain was already full of dirty thoughts. Gu Nanli immediately said, "I won't force you if you don't want to. Go back if you want to. Come back before dinner." Wei Wei Bai got up. She took the coat by the sofa and planned to go back to take a look. But just as she sat up, Gu Nanli suddenly reached out and held her delicate ankle. Slash. Chapter 1453. Wei Wei Bai tried to move, but found that he was holding on tightly like a shackle. "Master Gu, if you don't want me to leave, just say it. You don't have to be so fake." Gu Nanli lowered his eyes, but did not let go of her foot. Instead, he took a bottle of nail polish from the sofa with one hand. "What color do you want?" Wei Wei Bai's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. "I thought you didn't like this." Gu Nanli was silent for a few seconds, then said, "But you like it." Other than freedom, he would try to give her everything she liked. Wei Wei Bai shook her foot and said with a frown, "Forget it, there's no need." Gu Nanli let go of her foot and opened the nail polish bottle. It was bright red. The color was beautiful, and her feet were even more beautiful. Gu Nanli did not care how lowly he looked when he squatted down. He calmly took the nail polish bottle and used a small brush to apply the red nail polish on her toes. Her natural nail color was the most beautiful. But she liked these, so he tried to lower his status and not stop her. Wei Wei Bai was stunned, as if she could not understand what he was doing. After Gu Nanli finished applying the nail polish, he looked at the color that was not dry. He thought for a moment, then lowered his head and blew on it. Wei Wei Bai trembled and retracted her foot. He was not angry, but only looked down and said calmly, "When you go back today, you can bring some things back. Bring whatever you like." He would give her the people around him. Cece's people would only arrive the day after tomorrow. Wei Wei Bai looked at him speechlessly for a moment, then suddenly reached out and grabbed his collar, pulling him down. Then she raised her head and kissed him on the lips. The warm breath intertwined, and the man's breathing became heavy. Before he could react, Wei Bai had already let go of him. She then smiled and said, "This is for you, little husky. I've painted my nails. Help me put on my shoes." Gu Nonli hesitated for a moment, only to see her half leaning on the sofa. Her eyes, which had been indifferent for many days, had a hint of joy. She finally felt a little happier. By the time he regained his senses, he had already helped her put on her shoes. There was not even a trace of shame in his heart. When his fingers touched her ankles and insteps, there was even a trace of uncontrollable morbid greed in his heart. He helped her put on her shoes. Gu Nonli suddenly raised his head and looked at her intently. Wei Bai didn't react for a moment. She wanted to get up and leave, but he grabbed her ankle and didn't let go. He continued to look at her. She was at a loss for a moment. Then, she saw a strange grievance in his eyes. The corners of Wei Bai's mouth twitched. She resisted the chill and lowered her head to kiss his lips. Gu Nonli was satisfied. He released her. "Go early and come back early." His voice became gentle. Wei Bai trembled. This man's gentleness was simply abnormal. Then she heard the notification sound of the affection level. Ding, the male lead's affection has increased to 60. This affection level rose like it was abnormal. Wei Bai returned to the Bai family with a large group of bodyguards following behind her. They were all strong and had weapons in their pockets. They were wearing black suits and sunglasses, as if they were afraid that others wouldn't know that they were up to no good. Wei Bai walked into the Bai family with an expressionless face. The Bai family was still the same as before. Gu Nonli's massacre made the entire underworld not dare to make a sound. Even if there were all kinds of revenge assassinations in the dark, for the current Gu Nonli, he had already become the true overlord of the underworld. These were just small matters. Chapter 1454. Wei Bai's Bai family was imprisoned because of her. She immediately became a toy in Gu Nonli's hands. His people began to infiltrate her business. They slowly grasped her business in their hands. These were still hers. But it had to go through his hands. Actually, it was still his. How could she have a say in it? Gu Nonli was determined to raise a bird, not to let it fly. This man had no sense of security. He didn't even believe that with his incomparable good looks, huge wealth, ruthless and cool methods, there would be women who would love him. It was too late for Bai Weiwei to pretend to love him like a little white flower. The characters said in the beginning prevented her from becoming a retard and a sucker to warm Gu Nonli's heart. And she had almost destroyed him once. Gu Nonli was very guarded against her now. Wei Bai said to the system, "It seems that the strategy is a lifetime. Can't you allow me to rest?" There had never been a plane where the pace of the strategy was so sluggish because of the target. Gu Nonli's heart was too hard to open. And because of the side mission, she didn't have any information about Gu Nonli's childhood in her data. She couldn't figure out where his terrifying heart came from. There was surprisingly little information about Gu Nonli in this world. The system didn't say anything. It wasn't easy for her to guess alone with a bitter face. Wei Bai arrived at the Bai family and saw Bai Mu standing at the door with a bitter face, holding the dog and looking at her. Mississippi, he saw the person behind her and his expression became fierce. Wei Bai looked at him indifferently. "I'm here to pack up. You continue to manage the company. I'll come back when I'm free." Bai Mu wanted to say something but stopped. Seeing so many people, he didn't dare to say anything. Wei Bai sat on the sofa and said to the person behind her, "Go and pack up my things. If you want to move them quickly." She was bossy and her actions were natural, as if it was natural for her to command others to serve her. Bai Mu carried the dog and carefully came to her side. He even asked the servant to bring some warm tea. Wei Wei Bai sipped her tea. Nothing will happen at home. After I leave, I'll appease the subordinates and the elders of the Bai family. Let them continue with their work in peace. Bai Mu said, Miss, are you going to be trapped by Gu Nonli like this for the rest of your life? Wei Wei Bai sneered, what else? You want to become Superman to save me? It's not enough to save me. Do you think so many people at home can escape with me? Furthermore, if he ran away, how would he be able to capture Gu Nonli? What a difficult little demoness. She gnawed at him until her teeth ached. His kidneys were already weak, but he still dared to act like he was not satisfied. He had only recovered a little in the past few days, and now he was kissing and touching again. Now, almost everyone knew that she had an affair with Gu Nonli. And it was Gu Nonli who deliberately did it for others to see. He even made it clear that in the future, they did not need to send gifts to curry favor with him. It was enough to curry favor with Wei Wei Bai. Who wasn't a shrewd person? Wei Wei Bai suddenly became a hot new star in the underworld. Gu Nonli wanted her to be labeled as his woman wherever she went. Scheming bitch. Wei Wei Bai drank her tea with a cold face. Such a lukewarm approach was not her style. She couldn't wait to reach 100 points, kick Gu Nonli away, and have fun by herself. When Bai Mu heard Wei Wei Bai's disdainful words, he was silent for a moment before saying, I'm sorry, Mississippi. Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt that something was wrong. She immediately looked up at him, but her vision turned black and her head was dizzy. /crossover system, Adonis, come over here. Chapter 1455. Tongzi. The system did not warn her that there was something wrong with the tea. The system said, don't worry, I'll watch over you. Bai Mu was one of the characters in the side mission, so he could not warn Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai trusted him, okay. Then she fell onto the sofa, the teacup in her hand falling to the ground. Bai Mu stood at the side and watched as she fainted. His expression contorted. Then, before anyone could react, he threw a punch. A group of people broke through the door. It was the police. Bai Mu's expression became cold and stern, arrest them all. The system looked at Bai Mu's information and opened it. Damn, this guy was a spy in the Bai family. He had been in hiding for 8 years. Bai Qi trusted him so much because he was the illegitimate son of Bai Qi who had an accidental one-night stand with a girl when he was young. The system had a "what the hell is this?" look on its face. So this was what happened back then. Gu Nonli was Bai Qi's child. He was swapped by Gu Buddha, then tortured and abused in the Gu family, causing him to be indifferent to family and hate family. Bai Mu was Bai Qi's illegitimate son. He was adopted when he was wandering outside, then became a spy and returned to Bai Qi's side, planning to arrest his father and put him in prison. Gu Nonli and Bai Mu were biological brothers. What was even more ridiculous was that Bai Mu was older than Gu Nonli by a few years. Bai Mu was Gu Nonli's brother. The side mission could be so ridiculous and complicated. And Bai Qi's death was also a headshot by Bai Mu. The system, this father had tricked him, and now he was dead. How much hatred did he have? Wasn't this complicated and strange family side mission tricking its host? Who would have guessed? Wei Wei Bai had a splitting headache. When she woke up, she saw a strange yet familiar man standing beside her. When he saw that she had woken up, he immediately held her face and gave her a few sips of warm water. Are you feeling better? Wei Wei Bai looked at him blankly, as if she did not know him. The man fed her some water and looked at her silently for a while before saying, "I'm Bai Mu." Wei Wei Bai looked at his handsome face and finally couldn't hold it in anymore. "Did you go for plastic surgery?" After saying that, she saw his face contort and immediately added, "You did a good job. You look pretty good." Bai Mu's expression twisted even more. "I've always looked like this." It was only because of the special makeup that his face became inconspicuous. The confusion in Wei Wei Bai's eyes gradually dissipated. Her eyes regained their coldness. "Who are you?" Bai Mu was silent for a few seconds before he awkwardly looked away. "I'm your older brother." Wei Wei Bai, the system added, "He's actually Gu Nonli's older brother, but Bai Mu doesn't know that you've been switched." Bai Mu had always known that Bai Qi was his father. Wei Wei Bai was his sister. As for Gu Nonli, he was the big bad guy who should be caught. Wei Wei Bai thought of the side mission. The mystery of Gu Nonli's birth couldn't be that she had to investigate how many family members he had, right? So Bai Mu was also included in the side mission. He was the one who caught her, so the system did not remind her in advance. Wei Wei Bai muttered to herself, "Older brother." Bai Mu's face reddened and he awkwardly looked away. He clenched his fingers and said, "The Bai family has been arrested for being involved in the smuggling case. You're now one of the suspects and need to be interrogated. I've already applied for special witness protection for you, so you won't be treated too badly." Wei Wei Bai's eyes turned cold. "Special witness?" Bai Mu looked at her blankly before saying, "Accuse Gu Nonli and provide evidence of his crimes. You definitely know what he's doing." Save button at the bottom to record this reading. You'll see it the next time you open the bookshelf. If you liked crossover system, Adonis, come over here, comma. Chapter 1456. Gu Nonli was like an impenetrable fortress. There was no weakness to be exploited. Finally, Wei Wei Bai appeared. Everyone was using her as a breakthrough point. Bai Mu had exposed his identity in advance so that he could take her away from that dark world. Then, she would be rewarded for capturing Gu Nonli and atoning for her crimes. Moreover, Wei Wei Bai was locked up by Gu Nonli. She must hate him to death. Bai Mu thought of the occasional ambiguous marks on her neck and arms, and his eyes became angry. She would definitely accuse Gu Nonli. "I refuse." Bai Mu was confused. "What?" Wei Wei Bai's eyes were cold and she repeated softly, "I refuse." After that, she took the glass on the table and smashed it on Bai Mu's head. Blood immediately gushed out from his head. Wei Wei Bai immediately rushed out. The door opened, but she couldn't escape. A group of people were guarding outside the door, looking at her coldly. Wei Wei Bai leaned against the door and sighed regretfully. Then, she turned to look at Bai Mu. Bai Mu's head was covered in blood. Glass shards stuck to his hair. At this moment, he looked like a demon. Finally, he couldn't help but ask in a trembling voice, "You fell in love with Gu Nonli?" Wei Wei Bai was silent for half a second. Finally, she couldn't help but laugh. She seemed to think that he was joking. "Who likes that silly husky? He's so insensitive and straight." Bai Mu's eyes were sharp. "Then why aren't you a witness?" Wei Wei Bai sneered. "Because I'm his first woman." "Bai Mu," Wei Wei Bai kindly explained, "I can't help it. It's his first time. Although I don't want to take responsibility, I can't let him rot in jail. You know, the first time is always very important." "Bai Mu, I don't understand the perverted world." "Don't explain." He held back his anger and reached for a tissue to press on the wound on his forehead. Then, he walked over to Wei Wei Bai and suddenly reached out to hold her down. "Wei Wei, I'm not joking with you. You're a suspect now. If you don't accuse Gu Nonli, you'll be in danger. Wei Wei Bai felt a sharp pain in her wrist. She endured the pain and said, "Where did you come from?" Bai Mu is not like you. He won't harm me. Bai Mu's fingers trembled. Wei Wei Bai coldly said, "My father told me that Bai Mu would never hurt me, and he would never betray me." Bai Mu's face paled. He had no feelings for the Bai clan or Bai Qi. Only towards her, suppressing the unspeakable feelings in his heart, his expression turned cold. "Tell me everything about Gu Nonli. This is very important." Wei Wei Bai said, "His posture in bed is not good. He only does the same few things, and his kidney is weak. His body is not good." Bai Mu, just as Wei Wei Bai was talking nonsense with Bai Mu, Gu Nonli sat on the chair without saying a word. His face was snow white, his eyes were extremely dark, and his hair was covering his eyes. There was an extremely cold and noble air about him. Everyone looked at him, trembling. There was a long silence. This extremely oppressive atmosphere was almost driving everyone crazy. Gu Nonli finally spoke. "Cici, go back to China first." Cici, who was at the side, was holding a poker card in his hand and counting in boredom. "What are you going to do? You're not really going to go up against those guys, are you?" Their biggest taboo was the security guards of the white-faced world. Bai Mu's status in the white-faced world was very high. The power that was involved was not something that those small squabbles in the past could compare to. Wei Wei Bai had been taken away. If they wanted to snatch her back, it would be a matter of life and death. Chapter 1457. Gu Nonli got up and put on his jacket expressionlessly. "Wei Wei will betray me. She knows too many things about me. She won't let go of this opportunity to defeat me." Cici dropped a few cards in his hand. "How can you be so sure that your little bird will betray you?" Gu Nonli said calmly, "It's not the first time anyway. She will only be happy if I die. Of course she would be happy if no one imprisoned her." Cici asked, "Then what are you going to do?" Gu Nonli pursed his thin lips, his expression cold and gloomy. "I'm going to save her at all costs." Cici immediately advised, "Calm down. You have to think about this at length." Gu Nonli's gaze was like a knife in the dark, cold and ruthless. "I can't wait. She hasn't seen many things yet. If I'm late, she will be afraid." That place was the graveyard of the underworld. She had never been caught before. She would be afraid. The cards in Cici's hand finally fell to the ground. He said seriously, "Gu, you don't like her. This is love. For a man to sacrifice so much for a woman, it was no longer in the category of love. Cici liked so many women, but he didn't love any of them. There was a limit to how much he liked. If he had to sacrifice too much, he would give up. But if it was love, then he would share life and death with her. With Gu Nonli's attitude, it was impossible that he liked her. Gu Nonli was expressionless, his black eyes fixed on Cici. After a moment of silence, he said, "What did you call her just now?" Cici's face was full of question marks. What did he say just now? Without waiting for Cici to understand, he punched him, making him see stars and his ears ring. "I told you not to call me little bird anymore. Even if you want to call me that, it should be me." Gu Nonli punched Cici and said calmly, "Don't worry." Cici covered his face with his hand and shouted angrily, "You're a pervert, right? How can you hit someone because of a name? You love her, right?" Gu Nonli was already irritated, so he raised his hand and knocked him out with another punch. Very good, the world was quiet. Gu Nonli tidied up his clothes. His fingers were pale and trembling. He didn't know if she loved him or not. In any case, he felt that she should stay by his side and not go anywhere. The strong light made by Weiwei squint her eyes somewhat uncomfortably. Her skin was white to begin with. Coupled with the fact that she hadn't had enough rest during this period of time, this white color became unhealthy and fragile, as if it would disappear in the next second. Bai Mu looked at her coldly, his fingers digging into the flesh of his palm. Another interrogator beside him said coldly, "How long have you been with Gu Nonli? Have you guys worked together before? Have you killed anyone? What's the smuggling route? How many accomplices do you have?" A series of questions were asked repeatedly. They had been forcing her to answer like this for the past few days. Weiwei Bai smiled tiredly. "I don't know. What are you talking about? I'm doing a legitimate job. As for Gu Nonli, we're just a one-night stand, all right. Even though we've had more than one-night stands, I only know his name. How would I know anything else?" She wasn't allowed to sleep or eat. She was only given some water when she couldn't hold on any longer. Ever since she rejected Bai Mu's request to betray Gu Nonli, Bai Mu seemed to have given up all hope as she was brought up to this point for interrogation. Bai Mu, on the other hand, did not utter a single word. From the beginning to the end, he coldly watched the interrogator interrogate her. Save button at the bottom to record this reading. You'll be able to see it the next time you open the bookshelf. If you like. Chapter 1458. Unless the interrogators wanted to do something to her. Otherwise, Bai Mu wouldn't have stopped them. And even though Weiwei Bai was forced to such a weak and painful state, she didn't reveal a single bit of information about Gu Nonli. Even a man would break down in less than half a day. She had already held on for 4 days. This kind of perseverance was simply unimaginable. Even the interrogators were impatient and under great psychological pressure. They had never seen such a difficult bone to chew. Just as Weiwei Bai said that she didn't know again, Bai Mu suddenly walked over and smashed the strong light on the ground. His expression was furious as he grabbed her wrist tightly. Looking at her face that was so weak that it was about to break down, he gritted his teeth and said, "Why don't you talk? You'll die." With such devastation, not only her mind, but her body couldn't take it either. If she kept refusing to talk, she would go crazy if the interrogation continued. Weiwei Bai looked up lazily, her eyes bloodshot. She laughed coldly. "What are you talking about, brother? I don't know anything other than sleeping with him. And I think he's quite good. He's cute and pitiful. He doesn't even dare to sleep alone. This kind of man is definitely timid and won't do bad things." "Fuck you, won't do bad things." Gu Nonli had already become a big boss in the underworld. Won't do bad things. Did he become the head of the arms industry by persuading others to do good? Bai Mu said word by word, "You just like him, don't you?" This tone didn't sound like a sibling's. It sounded more like catching an adulterer. Weiwei Bai looked at him strangely, as if she felt that he was abnormally agitated. Bai Mu avoided her gaze awkwardly, then let go of her hand and said fiercely, "Continue the interrogation." After saying that, he was afraid that he would soften and leave immediately. After leaving, he took out a cigarette and lit it, then lowered his head dispiritedly. It was different from what he had expected. It was all different. He thought that she would be a witness and hate Gu Nonli. He had already found a way for her. As long as she destroyed Gu Nonli, she would be the biggest contributor. She can be acquitted. Then, he was her brother. Since the Bai family had been captured, he was the only one she could rely on. She could only live with him. A dark thought appeared in his mind. Bai Mu's fingers trembled. His breathing grew heavier as he warned himself, They were blood-related siblings. Even if they had never lived together, they were still related by blood. Suddenly, the door opened and the person inside said anxiously, "The suspect has fainted. Send him to the hospital." Bai Mu's vision went black, and the cigarette in his hand fell to the ground. He hurriedly rushed in, only to see Wei Wei Bai lying on the table silently. Her face was frighteningly pale, and there was a terrible aura of death under her eyes, as if she would die at any time. He immediately picked her up and rushed out. On the way to the hospital, in the ambulance, Bai Muchuan received a call from the station. Someone on Gu Nonli's side leaked information. It's a document of Gu Nonli's crimes. It's very detailed. We can arrest him now. Bai Mu's breathing paused. Who leaked the secret? I can't say. Sorry, this is a great merit. You can take the arrest warrant and arrest him now. If Bai Mu went to arrest him, it would be a greater merit than Bai Qi. Bai Mu looked at Wei Wei Bai, who was lying on the stretcher. She had lost a lot of weight in the past few days, and her face was pale. She had suffered so much that her mental state was on the verge of collapse. He gripped his phone tightly and suddenly said, "I won't go. But when you arrest him, say that the person who leaked the secret is Wei Wei Bai." She would completely turn against Gu Nonli. She would cut off all ties with that dark world. After Bai Mu hung up the phone, he looked at Wei Wei Bai in a daze for a while. Suddenly, he tried to reach out and touch her slender fingertips. That delicate touch caused his fingers to tremble for a while. He finally held her hand tightly and refused to let go. Comma. Chapter 1459. Gu Nonli sat in the car. He had just received news that Wei Wei Bai had been sent to the hospital. What hospital had been kept a secret? This was not a problem for him. He began to investigate the number of people sent to the hospital today. As long as there was a hospital admission record, he could find it. After checking everywhere, he could not find any records. Wei Wei Bai's admission record had been hidden. Gu Nonli only said coldly, "Continue to investigate. Also check the number of times the ambulance went out." Just as he was investigating, Cici called. "Gu, I've called for a private jet. You have to leave with me tonight. Wei Wei Bai really betrayed you and leaked everything about you." Cici looked very busy. "That's strange. Aren't you very guarded against her? How did she find out?" Gu Nonli was silent for a moment before saying, "I've put all the information in a place where she can reach." "Cici, what the hell?" "Gu Nonli, I want to see if she will really betray me a second time." Cici almost hit the wall. "You've become stupid from being in love." "No, you're not in love. You're taking her by force. You know that she hates you, yet you still do such a stupid thing." Gu Nonli said indifferently, "Oh. Cici, oh your head. Hurry up and get on the plane with me. Let's go abroad to hide. You have a strong foundation. It's easy for you to return to your peak, but you have to get through this." "Gu Nonli, I want to take her away." Cici was about to kneel down. People in love were indeed stupid. They were all fools. How could he work with a fool? This was his grand plan. Cici wanted to say something, but Gu Nonli had already hung up. His subordinates said that the investigation had reached the hospital. Gu Nonli took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart before saying, "Save her." He took out his gun. The veins on the back of his hand were bulging. His calm expression finally collapsed. "Hospital. What happened to her? Did they hit her? How heavy? Was it life-threatening?" Gu Nonli's calm mind went crazy. He actually started to feel afraid. This fear was not the same as when he was young, nor was it the fear of falling into a nightmare. Instead, it was mixed with the fury of wanting to destroy everything if anything happened to her. Wei Wei Bai was put on an intravenous drip and injected with a nutrition injection. She struggled to regain consciousness. In fact, the system had given her a lot of sobriety potions. She didn't feel uncomfortable, but her body's weakness didn't decrease. Therefore, his body still looked like it was in great pain. Wei Wei Bai complained to the system, so Gu Nanli has an older brother, Bai Mu. Bai Mu is Bai Qi's illegitimate son. Bai Mu hates Bai Qi, so he went undercover for many years and finally got rid of Bai Qi. Now, Bai Mu plans to get rid of Gu Nanli. Bai Mu was practically a boss. Bai Mu was related to Gu Nanli's family background. As a result, when he was undercover, the system could not tell her. Wei Wei Bai felt that the side mission must be very complicated. Bai Qi couldn't have hundreds of illegitimate children outside, right? If she had to find all those illegitimate children to complete the side mission, wouldn't she be unable to complete it for the rest of her life? Wei Wei Bai's head hurt when she thought of the side mission. She could feel the malice of the main system towards her. System, side mission is 1/4 complete. After Bai Mu's identity was revealed, 1/4 of the side mission was completed. Wei Wei Bai's head hurt. After the effects of the sobriety potion, her body couldn't take it anymore. She raised her hand with difficulty. Just as she was about to sit up, a hand immediately supported her. Wei Wei Bai looked up. It was actually Bai Mu. To read the full article, download the full article to read the full article on Calm. Chapter 1460. Bai Mu's expression was solemn and tense, and his eyes were dark. He said, "Why are you so stubborn? Why do you have to make yourself like this? Just listen to me and you'll be free." If this continued, Wei Wei Bai would never be able to escape from that world. Bai Mu looked at her chapped lips, her unhealthily pale skin, and her tired but calm eyes. He felt bitter in his heart. Wei Wei Bai expressionlessly tried to withdraw her hand, but he refused to let go. "Don't you want to clear your name and not mix in that world anymore? Why are you still protecting Gu Nanli?" Wei Wei Bai leaned against the bed and looked at him coldly. "Who I'm protecting has nothing to do with you betraying me. I don't want to clear my name by sending myself to the police station." Bai Mu looked at her silently for a while before sighing. "You won't change anything even if you make a fuss like this. Arresting Gu Nanli is a must. I won't let him escape." Then, without looking at Wei Wei Bai, he poured her a glass of water. Wei Wei Bai suddenly asked, "Where are the Bai family members?" Bai Mu paused with the glass in his hand and said, "They're all in prison. Their crimes are basically confirmed. Because the arrest was rushed, many crimes were dug too deep, so no one was sentenced to death. But there were many life sentences." Bai Mu did not continue. He handed the glass of water to Wei Wei Bai. "Drink some." Wei Wei Bai looked away coldly with some disdain. Scram. Bai Mu was stunned for a while. He held the glass with frightening strength. Suddenly, he pressed her down and put the glass to her mouth. "Be good, listen to your brother. Drink some water." Wei Wei Bai did not notice and was forced to drink a few mouthfuls of water. She almost choked to death. Bai Mu's expression was somewhat sinister, and his eyes were filled with suppressed anger. "You have to listen to me in the future. You know that an elder brother is like a father, right?" Wei Wei Bai, the system was so shocked that it dropped the bag of snacks. "Oh my God, this is an invisible pervert." Wei Wei Bai, invisible my ass, it's obvious. This cheap brother was too evil. That's right. He even killed his own father, and his entire family was imprisoned because of him. Her crazy brother was even more frightening than a landmine. He was only satisfied when he made Wei Wei Bai drink water. Then, he stared at her blankly for a while before suddenly taking out a pair of handcuffs. Wei Wei Bai asked the system, "What are you doing? Even the handcuffs are out." The system said, "Maybe this big brother is especially righteous and saw through your evil soul, so he wants to drag you to jail." In the end, Bai Mu grabbed her fragile wrist and roasted her hand on the railing of the bed. "Bai Mu, it's only temporary. If you want to go to the toilet, tell me. I'll go with you." Wei Wei Bai and the system were speechless. He even accompanied her to the toilet. He was even scarier than the jailer. No, which brother would accompany his sister to the toilet? It's not like I'm 1 and you're 3. Don't you know how to avoid suspicion when you're already an adult? Wei Wei Bai, Tongzi, biological siblings will be blocked, right? The system licked the empty bag of snacks. You're not biological siblings. Bai Mu and Gu Nanli were biological brothers. Perverts were hereditary. Look at these two little perverts. Wei Wei Bai was speechless. Bai Mu sat beside her. He fed her, cut an apple for her, and helped her wash her hands and wipe her face. He looked like a good brother. However, Wei Wei Bai could smell his perverted aura. Every time he touched her, she felt like she was being stared at by a wild beast. Transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here, /transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here, / transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. Download transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. Chapter 1461. The system hugged the empty bag of snacks. It had seen enough of Bai Mu's perverted brother's attitude, so it went to look at Gu Nanli. However, it found that Gu Nanli had already arrived at the entrance of the hospital. The system quickly reminded Wei Wei Bai, "The male lead is here." Wei Wei Bai was shocked. When she was being interrogated, she did not say a single bad word about Gu Nanli. After all, there was a turning point in the strategy. She would rather die than reveal Gu Nanli's information. She did not betray him, so this was a turning point. It made him realize that she actually had a good impression of him. Then, when she slowly started to like him, he would not find it strange anymore. After all, if she kept going against him, she would not be able to unravel the mystery of his birth, let alone unravel the defenses in his heart. Wei Wei Bai decided to go with a sweet and heartwarming strategy. She did not mind when he called her ugly in the past. Wei Wei Bai quickly prepared herself. She asked the system, "Am I miserable?" The system looked at her pale face, haggard dark circles under her eyes, and weak appearance. It nodded and said, "You look very miserable." It was obvious that she had been tortured. Although it knew that the host did not suffer too much with the help of the sobriety potion, the appearance could still fool people. Wei Wei Bai, that's right. Wait, am I beautiful? It's that haggard, weak, and pitiful appearance that makes people's heart ache. The system, Wei Wei Bai, it's not miserable enough. It has to be miserable and beautiful, haggard and flawless. If she had a bruised nose, swollen eyes, 2 lines of nosebleeds, and a dirty face, Gu Nanli would not have a good impression of her. The system. Beautiful, right? As long as the host was happy. Suddenly, it felt that there were more than 2 perverts. The host was much more perverted than the 2 brothers. The system silently licked the bag of snacks. In this day and age, it was not fashionable to not be perverted enough. Wei Wei Bai sighed in relief, "He's here to save me." It seemed that there were benefits to having a favorable impression of over 60 points. The system was silent for a while. "I think he's here to settle the score with you." Wei Wei Bai, ? The system said, Gu Nonli's crimes have been exposed, and now the police are chasing after him. Apparently, you're the one who leaked the information, so he's probably going to kill you before he escapes. Bai Weiwei, this is all right. Didn't I just work for nothing? She was still thinking about how she could use this heroic act to win an opportunity to change her strategy. Which idiot leaked the information? When Gu Nonli entered the hospital, his phone rang again. His face was cold as he lowered his eyes to look at his phone. His thick eyelashes covered his cold eyes, which were full of murderous intent. Gu Nonli answered the call. Cici said, I'm ready. Come back as soon as you're done. We'll go abroad together. Gu Nonli's eyelids fluttered. His face was hidden in the shadows, and there was a kind of evil yet delicate beauty to it. You go first, I need to confirm something. Cici was already rushing to the airport. He said as he walked, What do you have time to confirm now? Gu Nonli's voice was very calm. I think you're right. Although I can lock her up for life, she can still find a chance to escape. So I want to try to make her fall in love with me and not leave me. Cici, This has to be done slowly. You need to save her and get on the plane quickly. Also, she betrayed you, so you have to be wary of her. Gu Nonli, I'm not going back. She didn't betray me. Cici, wait, that's a bit too much information. He thought. Transmigration system, Adonis, come here, /transmigration system, Adonis, come here, / transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Chapter 1462. Before he could finish, Cici had already heard Gu Nonli's cold and indifferent voice. I was the one who leaked that information. You have to keep it a secret. I've decided to let her know that it's all her fault that I'm in danger. She'll feel guilty, pity me, and then like me. He had studied some books. It was said that women had maternal instincts. He felt that he could give it a try. Cici, he couldn't figure it out. What the hell was this? Then Gu Nonli hung up the phone. Cici was stunned for a long time. He was almost dumbfounded. He wondered if there was something wrong with his ears. Gu Nonli sold himself to the police, causing countless people to chase after him and destroy his foundation. Oh, just to woo a woman. What a complicated plan to woo a woman. Damn you, Gu Nonli. What kind of plan is this? Your IQ must have been eaten by dogs. Bai Mu forked a piece of apple for Wei Wei Bai. Eat some, Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai's face was cold. When are you going to let go of me? Bai Mu looked at her handcuffs indifferently. I'll let go of you when you can be discharged from the hospital. Wei Wei Bai was not surprised at all. She looked at the apple and was silent for a while before she leaned over and bit into it. Her thin red lips were beautifully shaped. When she bit the apple, there was a kind of soft and sharp charm. Bai Mu's hands trembled and he immediately stood up. His breathing was chaotic, and he looked at her with fear in his eyes. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have sensed something. She slowly ate the apple and suddenly said, Brother. These two words, a form of address. Lingering to the bone. Bai Mu did not know that a form of address could kill. He had nowhere to hide under her calm but seductive gaze. Wei Wei Bai was finally sure. She looked at him with hatred and suddenly could not suppress her laughter. You don't like me, right? That's impossible. Bai Mu didn't utter a word. He clenched his fists and straightened his back. He was in a sorry state, but he couldn't escape. He wanted to refute, but he didn't know what to say. His heart was in a mess. Those unspeakable and terrifying desires all turned into knives that stabbed into his heart under her sarcasm. Wei Wei Bai's laughter suddenly disappeared. She said coldly, "Disgusting. Simply perverted." Bai Mu's entire body trembled, and he couldn't help but shout angrily in a low voice, "Enough, don't say any more." Wei Wei Bai repeated, "Pervert, falling in love with your own sister, if that's not perverted, then what is?" Bai Mu, who was already suffering from moral torment, finally broke down completely under her intense and disgusted gaze. He rushed to the side of the bed, stretched out his hands and grabbed her thin and fragile shoulders, and pushed her onto the bed. "If I'm a pervert, what are you? You're clearly Gu Nonli's plaything, yet you're willing to endure several days of mental interrogation for him. Do you know how much you're sacrificing him? He doesn't like you at all, yet you're willing to sacrifice yourself to this extent for him." Wei Wei Bai's eyes were cold, and the corners of her eyes rose into a cold arc. "I'm happy to do so. Mind your own business." These words completely crushed Bai Mu, who was already under a lot of mental pressure. He stared at her face and suddenly lowered his head. But before he could touch her, she suddenly pulled out the gun in his clothes and pressed it against his head. "Let go of me," Wei Wei Bai said fiercely. She had angered him so that he would lose his guard and approach her, so that she could snatch his gun. Bai Mu immediately calmed down. He stared at her blankly for 3 seconds before suddenly saying, "You're very smart, but you're not strong enough. You'll see it the next time you open the bookshelf. If you like." Chapter 1463. After saying that, his hand grabbed her wrist at lightning speed and pressed down hard, causing her fingers to lose all strength. The gun fell back into his hands. Wei Wei Bai's intelligence was useless. Her martial prowess was not worth mentioning in front of a real expert. At such a close distance, any weapon would be useless. Wei Wei Bai gasped and slapped Bai Mu's face without hesitation. "It doesn't matter if you're strong or not. You're a pervert." Bai Mu's face turned red from her slap. He glared at her fiercely. Suddenly, Bai Mu seemed to have sensed something. He turned around abruptly, but the door was kicked open. The 2 people guarding the door were subdued. Gu Nonli strode in. His face was unnaturally pale like Wei Wei Bai's, and his eyes were dark and cold. Then, he saw that Bai Mu was holding Wei Wei Bai's hand. Wei Wei Bai's clothes were a little messy. Bai Mu's breathing was a little unnatural. The 2 of them were in an ambiguous state. Gu Nonli stopped in his tracks and looked at the 2 of them without blinking. Then, he looked at Bai Mu coldly. His gaze was like that of a venomous snake, causing goosebumps to rise on Bai Mu's back. Bai Mu sneered. "Gu Nonli, you're courting death. How dare you barge in here?" The hospital was not under Gu Nonli's control. If he barged in now, he would be surrounded later. Gu Nonli's deep and cold eyes were still looking at their interlocked hands. Suddenly, he rushed forward and raised his elbow to hit Bai Mu's face. Bai Mu hurriedly let go of Wei Wei Bai and dodged backward, slamming into the wall. Then, he raised his leg and kicked Gu Nonli's abdomen. Gu Nonli reached out and blocked his leg. His hand was already grabbing Bai Mu's shoulder and breaking it. The crisp sound of bones breaking could be heard. Bai Mu's face was deathly pale. He directly picked up his gun and fired at him. Gu Nonli reached out and nimbly stepped back. The bullet went out of control and shot into the ceiling, but it bounced back. And the direction of the rebound was Wei Wei Bai, who was handcuffed to the hospital bed. Wei Wei Bai, this was too unlucky. The 2 men who were fighting to the death were fine, but she was the one who died. Gu Nonli's mind went blank. His pupils constricted as he pounced forward. He hugged Wei Wei Bai, and the bullet immediately penetrated his shoulder. His shoulder already had an old injury, and this time, the new injury and the old injury exploded together. Blood splattered everywhere, and the snow-white hospital bed was dyed bright red. Bai Weiwei heard the fierce beating of his heart in his chest. His breath was hot and heavy against her neck, and the trembling of his body also affected her. Weiwei Bai didn't expect that a favorable impression of 65 points could make this man sacrifice himself to this extent. She moved her lips and called out softly, "Gu Nanli." Gu Nanli replied indifferently, "Yeah." Then he let go of her, blocked her line of sight, and looked at Bai Mu. Bai Mu's face was deathly pale, and his hands and feet were cold as he looked at them. His shot just now had almost killed Wei Wei Bai. And the bodyguard who came with Gu Nanli immediately subdued Bai Mu, took away his gun, and punched him in the stomach. Gu Nanli pulled out his gun from his pocket expressionlessly, raised his hand, and shot Bai Mu in the shoulder. Bai Mu trembled in pain. Gu Nanli was so calm that he was cold. Another bullet went into Bai Mu's thigh. This was the cruelest way to kill someone. One bullet after another went into a non-fatal area. Then, after torturing him enough, he killed him. Especially this man's hand, he must break it first. Chapter 1464. Just as Gu Nanli was about to pull the trigger again, the sound of several cars stopping came from outside the window. While he was distracted, Bai Mu risked his life to smash a bodyguard away. Then, he jumped onto the windowsill and jumped down. This was the 3rd floor. Wei Wei Bai watched Bai Mu's flying performance in shock. Gu Nanli raised his gun and shot Bai Mu in the back. His accuracy was not good enough. He wanted to hit the heart, but he missed the distance and only hit the side of the heart. He didn't know if he was dead or alive. Gu Nanli showed a pained expression as blood gushed out of his shoulder. The bodyguard immediately came over and gave him emergency treatment. Gu Nanli saw Wei Wei Bai, who was in a daze. Then, he saw her handcuffs and a cold murderous look flashed across his eyes. He took a deep breath and suppressed the dark surge in his heart. Then, he walked to the bed and bent down. He pressed her head into his arms and said softly, "It's okay. Let's go." With that, he raised his gun and broke the handcuffs. Then, he carried the weak Wei Wei Bai and walked out. The hospital was surrounded. Gu Nanli was ready. Soon, they left through the escape route. The pursuers who came back to their senses quickly chased after Gu Nanli's car. Gu Nanli's shoulder was covered in blood. His muscles were tight, and it was obvious that the wound was very serious. But he was carrying Wei Wei Bai with one hand. The driver was an experienced driver and the car drifted quickly. Wei Wei Bai's mind was a little dazed. The results of the interrogation for the past few days had given her a splitting headache. The tip of her nose was filled with the smell of blood on his body. She looked up and saw his taut jaw, as well as his vigilant and cold eyes. And his hand was stroking her back comfortingly. Wei Wei Bai smiled and said weakly, "Gu Nanli, if you fight for me like this, I'll think you like me." Gu Nanli's fingers paused and he didn't say anything. The person in his arms leaned heavily against him. The familiar scent and temperature made his tense nerves relax a lot. He hugged her hand and couldn't help but hug her tighter. After losing her for a period of time, he realized that he was seriously dependent on her. It was like being poisoned. Even if he didn't know whether to love or not, he knew whether a person was special or not. She was special. So special that he was willing to lay a trap to catch her. Gu Nanli felt that it would be easier to fool her when she was so weak. So he was silent for a while and said reluctantly, he said, "I do like you." He sounded a little guilty when he said this. because he didn't know how to react to liking someone. He was more possessive of her now. However, all women liked men with honey in their mouths, so he tried to be this kind of man. After he finished confessing, he waited for her to cry and hug him back. But after waiting for a while, he looked down and saw that she had fallen asleep with her eyes closed. Her long eyelashes covered her eyes and she looked too tired. Gu Nanli was stunned. He stared at her for a few seconds and couldn't help kissing her eyes. This action was filled with a sense of treasure. But he didn't realize how gentle his actions were. Ding, the male lead's affection has increased to 70. Gu Nanli looked up and said to the driver, "There's a hotel in front, stop there." The driver quickly obeyed and stopped the car. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. / transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 1465. Gu Nanli endured the pain in his shoulder and didn't do much. He just carried Wei Wei Bai out of the car. Wei Wei Bai leaned against him quietly and softly. Her face was splattered with a few drops of his blood. Her fair face and bright red color made her look unusually delicious. Gu Nanli's eyes darkened, but he suppressed the thought of being worse than a beast. He turned back and said to the driver, "Flip the car down the mountain and then leave by yourself. You don't need to follow me." The driver was shocked. "Mr. Gu, this is too dangerous." Of course it was dangerous. This area was full of people who wanted to catch him. And there was no protection and no car. How could he escape? Gu Nanli had already thought about it. He had gone from a gangster with nothing to where he was today. He didn't rely on fantasy. With Wei Wei Bai, he still had the ability to escape from the people who wanted to catch him. If he escaped so easily, it would be a waste of the opportunity to show his pitiful side. Gu Nanli sent the driver away with a cold look. The driver could only drive the car to flip the car. After working for so long, this was the first time he had seen such a strange order. Gu Nanli carried her into the hotel. He knew that she was like this because of the interrogation and mental torture, but her body was fine. He put her on the bed. Under the light, she didn't sleep well. Her brows were tightly knitted, as if she was still suffering from a nightmare. Gu Nanli half squatted by the bed. The wound on his shoulder had been treated simply. Although the blood didn't gush out, the bullet wasn't taken out. He had been injured many times, but this injury wasn't the worst. After stopping the bleeding, he also took strong anti-inflammatory drugs and painkillers before getting into the car. So there was no major problem for the time being. Gu Nanli was waiting for her to wake up. This was a trap or a cage. To him, it was just a plan. His illness couldn't be separated from Wei Wei Bai. He couldn't sleep without her, and he couldn't even eat. He felt irritable looking at everything. He wanted her to stay by his side obediently, just like how she stayed in his safe. She didn't want to run away anytime, anywhere. Money, power, and threats could not achieve this 100% success rate. Cece's words reminded him that love was also a very powerful weapon. It could trap people. Make her fall in love with him so that she won't run away. As for how to make her fall in love with him, he thought about his plan. He would pretend to love her and then save the damsel in distress. Just now, the bullet had bounced off the light fixture on the ceiling before it brushed past Wei Wei Bai's bed. As for the direction of the shot, he estimated that Wei Wei Bai should be able to dodge it. So he pounced on her and hugged her, deliberately taking a bullet to save the beauty. Perfect. Then, he framed her. She didn't betray him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been sent to the hospital. This was out of his expectations. He had placed the information that had been passed through many hands, and even many of them were fake, in a place where she could easily access them. She didn't even open a single page. After he was caught, he didn't even say a single bad word about him. So he had no choice but to leak the secret and then pin the blame on her. Then, he would pretend to forgive her. She would feel that he was very good to her. Perfect. Next, he would pretend to be pitiful. His career was gone, and he was being hunted down, but he still didn't give up on her. He had already done this much. Even a dog loved him. She would definitely fall in love with him. Gu Nanli smoothly ran through his plan and found that everything was perfect. When she woke up, the plan would begin. Chapter 1466. Gu Nanli's shoulder was covered in blood as he stared blankly at Wei Wei Bai. He stared blankly at Wei Wei Bai, not daring to treat his wound as he was afraid that it was not bad enough. Wei Wei Bai had enough sleep, but her body was still weak. The system used a few days of life points to buy her some body recovery drinks. It was actually for the system, so it was very cheap. If it was for a human, a little bit would help her recover, but if it was too much, she would have epilepsy. So the system got a big bottle of orange juice that it bought for the host, which was actually for itself. Wei Wei Bai drank a little bit of the juice and felt refreshed. She said to the system, "What's the situation? Is Gu Nanli caught? Or is he going to die?" It would be best if Gu Nanli was messed with so badly that she could gain more favorability points. The system was at a loss for words. It could only tell the truth. The male lead asked the driver to overturn the car while he hugged you and waited for others to kill him. Wei Wei Bai thought about it calmly and concluded, "Is there something wrong with his brain?" The system said, "His heart is in water, he wants to woo you." Wei Wei Bai said, "It's really fate, so am I." The system said, "He's acting pitiful to woo you." Wei Wei Bai said, "It's okay, I'm acting cute, we don't clash." The system said, "He even leaked the secret to frame you." You didn't leak the secret, so he's blaming it on you to get your favorability points. Wei Wei Bai said, "Go ahead, if you can, it's my loss." They went back and forth, basically explaining Gu Nanli's old-fashioned plan to woo girls. Gu Nanli saw her eyelashes tremble slightly, as if she was about to wake up. He immediately looked around calmly, looked at the floor, and immediately lay down on the floor. Wei Wei Bai opened her eyes and realized. Where was Gu Nanli? A broken groan came from beside the bed. She immediately got up and looked down. He saw that Gu Nanli's face was deathly pale. His face was covered in cold sweat as he curled up on the ground. He stretched out his hand and pinched his arm tightly, as if he was enduring intense pain. On his handsome face, his thin red lips were like fragile petals, tightly pursed. Blood was seeping out of the wound on his shoulder, making him look extremely miserable. Wei Wei Bai could only give him full marks for this pathetic act. Wei Wei Bai also entered the zone. She staggered off the bed and patted Gu Nanli's face. "What's wrong with you, little husky?" Gu Nanli was breathing heavily. His eyelids were half closed, and his skin was covered in cold sweat. He was indeed injured, but he had endured until now to treat it. Wei Wei Bai touched his face and saw the wound on his shoulder. She immediately pried his hand away and tore open the clothes on his shoulder. She saw the bloody wound inside. Her lips trembled. "Why did you take the bullet from me? Don't you even want your hand?" Gu Nanli looked up at her with a scrutinizing gaze. Then, he finally saw the fear in her eyes instead of impatient disgust. He didn't know why, but he heaved a sigh of relief. The pain from the wound was overwhelming. When he was alone, the pain from these wounds was tolerable. But when he saw that she was worried, he groaned even louder, and his breathing became even more chaotic. Wei Wei Bai was so angry that she touched Gu Nonli all over. Gu Nonli's body trembled even more. Wei Wei Bai finally found the military knife that he had hidden. When she pulled it out, her fingers were trembling badly. "I have to remove the bullet for you," Gu Nonli hurriedly said. "The bullet passed through my shoulder and didn't stay in my body." Actually, he had removed it from the car. Otherwise, the bullet would have caused him to bleed out completely. /save button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 1467. Wei Wei Bai was at a loss for a while before she reacted. Her eyes were cold. "What do you mean, Gu Nonli?" Gu Nonli was provoked by her cold eyes, and his breathing became heavier. He was bare-chested, and the simple bandage on his shoulder was very conspicuous. The muscles on his arms and chest were slightly bulging because he was too agitated. "I've already received news that you've leaked all the information about my career to Bai Mu. The arrest warrant has probably arrived at my house." His voice was calm and cold, but the heat in his eyes could hardly be hidden. Wei Wei Bai looked at him for a while and suddenly laughed. "You think I'm the one who betrayed you? How do you think I found out about your career secrets? You didn't give me a chance to get close to you, except in bed." Gu Nonli pursed his lips, and his eyes were full of murderous intent. "You had a chance. I didn't guard against you. You can enter and leave my study at any time." The smile on Wei Wei Bai's face disappeared. "Gu Nonli, do you really believe that I will betray you?" Under her cold gaze, Gu Nonli could hear the dark thoughts in her heart. Yes. This time, he also felt that she would betray him. Although it was unexpected that she did not betray him. But what about next time? What about next time? There would be a day when she would betray him again. Only then did Gu Nonli realize how distrustful he was of her. His hand slowly touched her face, and his fingers suddenly pinched her chin. He lowered his eyes and said softly, "It's okay if you betray me. I still want you." This was not a plan. This was his true thoughts. He still wanted her, even if she really betrayed him. Wei Wei Bai looked at him coldly, and suddenly reached out to pinch the wound on his shoulder. The wound that was already bandaged split open again. Blood splattered on her face and body, and it looked unusually sad. "It's a pity that I'm not interested in you." Gu Nonli's pupils shrank, and the dark coldness in his eyes was about to overflow. Wei Wei Bai pushed him fiercely. "Get out of my way. You actually think that I would betray you? Why don't you just shoot me? Why are you still pretending to be a saint?" Gu Nonli did not expect her reaction to be so big. Shouldn't she be happy that he was willing to forgive her? He was at a loss for a while, and finally, the corners of his mouth twisted. "Didn't you betray me? After I caught you, I didn't shoot you. It's not the first time I've been the Holy Father." Wei Wei Bai's gaze was terrifyingly sharp, but her voice was surprisingly gentle. "Gu Nonli, would you believe me if I said that I didn't betray you?" It was not a matter of whether he believed it or not. She really didn't betray him this time. Gu Nonli was not a straightforward man. Plans could not keep up with changes. Was she so angry because he had wronged her? He immediately calmed down and said, "I believe you. I believe everything you say. Wei Wei Bai, you're speaking the truth. I'm too embarrassed to continue acting like this." Gu Nonli, on the other hand, was eagerly waiting for her feelings to change. He saved the beauty, forgave her, trusted her, and pretended to like her. If she still did not like him, he could only give up on this plan. It was too troublesome to chase after women. It was better to keep it locked up. Wei Wei Bai had a complicated expression on her face. It seemed like she was in disbelief, but also seemed like she was in doubt. It was more like she was tired and sad. She muttered to herself softly, "I want to betray you too," but, however, the rest of her words were swallowed by his kiss. The smell of blood on Gu Nali's body intertwined with the heat of his excitement, turning into a kind of lingering and imprisoning force that held her in his arms. /O. Chapter 1468. Therefore, he was only shot in the shoulder, and there were no other problems with the rest of his body. Moreover, it was not a dangerous rainforest or other harsh environment. To him, this kind of escape was really a piece of cake. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai, who had never escaped before, was pulled away by Gu Nanli. The hotel was very quiet. Gu Nanli smoothly went out from the back door, stole the hotel owner's van, stuffed her into the passenger seat, and drove away. He said, "The people chasing us don't know that we are here, and Bai Mu is probably going to die, so there is no effective chase. Leaving in the middle of the night will minimize the danger." Wei Wei Bai yawned lazily. What will you do in the future? A lot of information had been leaked, and an arrest warrant had been sent to them. Gu Nanli was now a suspect. He had the same status as her. What a good match. When Gu Nanli heard this question, his chance to act pitiful came. His expression immediately turned ugly, and his tone became forced. "It's okay, at most I will be arrested and sentenced to death, or I will keep running, and in the future, change my name and become a hooligan." From a mafia boss to a hooligan. This was too big a leap. And didn't he know how to do other jobs? He didn't want to turn over a new leaf and become a hooligan when he was cornered. He wanted to be a waiter, a roadside barbecue stall owner, or a street cleaner. Indeed, there was no normal job in the minds of bad people, and they could only follow the path to the end. When Wei Wei Bai was feeling sad about the loss of morality, Gu Nanli's voice was a little hesitant. "In the future, when I am in dire straits, will you still follow me?" Wei Wei Bai sneered. "Who will like you when you are poor? When you are rich, I didn't like you either." Of course, for the sake of the good feelings, Wei Wei Bai could only go against her conscience and say vaguely, "You won't be in dire straits." If she directly said that she would follow him, it would be strange if he believed her. This ambiguous answer made Gu Nanli tighten his grip on the steering wheel. Did she believe that he could make a comeback? Gu Nanli knew that it wouldn't be easy to get her to follow him for a while, but it wasn't bad to get this answer. His expression was calm, but the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curve into a smile. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, "Give me the gun." Gu Nanli was silent for a moment. His eyes couldn't help but turn cold. Giving her a gun was giving her a choice. It was easy for her to stay or leave. But when he thought of his plan, he still hesitantly threw his gun to her. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. She disassembled the gun for practice and then put it back together again. "Your shoulder is injured. If there are pursuers later, just focus on driving. Leave the rest to me." His simple words made people feel at ease. Gu Nanli saw that her movements were nimble and smooth, and the process of assembling the weapon was perfect. A hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. No matter how many times he saw it, he felt that her method of disassembling and assembling the weapon was miraculously beautiful. He had tried, but he couldn't reach her hand speed. If there was a hint of jealousy in the past, it was pure admiration now. Suddenly, a few cars rushed out from a diagonal corner, and Bing Bing fired at their car. Wei Wei Bai frowned. They caught up so quickly. Gu Nanli pursed his lips, not daring to expose himself. Because Bai Mu was on the verge of death, the people in charge of their case at the police station were in a mess. Chapter 1469. Gu Nonli only received the news before leaving the hotel that those guys would not chase after them for the time being. They were all in the hospital trying to save Bai Mu. Hence, Gu Nonli had no choice but to call back and get a few cars to chase after them. Otherwise, how could he pretend to be pitiful and down and out? Chasing women was really troublesome. Wei Wei Bai rubbed her wrist and took a deep breath. I'm still not used to killing people. This sentence was indescribably weak, but surprisingly, Gu Nonli did not hate it. She was not used to killing people, but it was normal. Although she was the daughter of the Bai family, she did not grow up by Bai Chi's side. Instead, she was sent overseas to be a greenhouse flower. Bai Chi had never thought of pulling her into this world. If Bai Chi had not been killed, she probably would not have come back and would have lived a peaceful life overseas. She might have met a good man, gotten married, and had children. She would have nothing to do with him. Gu Nonli's heart turned cold. He felt that Bai Chi's death was not bad. At least he met her. The emotional fluctuation when he heard that his biological father had died disappeared just like that. Wei Wei Bai rolled down the car window and stared at the streetlights outside. Suddenly, she leaned out and fired at the chasing cars mercilessly. The powerful recoil of the gun hurt her wrist, but she didn't hesitate and aimed at the wheels of the other party's car. The tires of the chasing cars burst, and some flipped over. The ear-piercing sound of the car sliding, the sound of gunshots, and the sound of the streetlights being hit by the cars. They intertwined into a soul-stirring sound. Gu Nonli looked at her from the side and saw her nimble posture, short hair flying back, eyes sharp and cold, and her cold face as delicate and fair as jade. Soft and cold. Gorgeous and pure. At the same time, they appeared on her at this moment. He had never thought that a woman could be so beautiful. All his stunning feelings came from the same woman. Wei Wei Bai ran out of bullets and sat down expressionlessly. Then, she removed the empty magazine. Do you have any more? Of course there was, but Gu Nonli said softly, no, I came out in too much of a hurry. He also had a gun on him in case she suddenly ran away and to kill the enemy. A trace of annoyance flashed across Wei Wei Bai's face. She pulled out the military knife that she had taken from Gu Nonli. If they catch up to you, you can run first. After all, I won't be sentenced to death even if I get caught. Gu Nonli's fingers almost slipped. A complicated emotion flashed through his eyes. Wei Wei Bai didn't seem to know about his complicated feelings. Instead, she said calmly, when they catch up with you later, just drive off the side of the road and into the alley. I will deal with the aftermath for you. Gu Nonli was at a loss for words. He was so angry that he laughed. How are you going to clean up after me with your three-legged cat skills? Wei Wei Bai was extremely calm. With my life. Just 3 simple words. There was no hesitation at all. Gu Nonli looked up at her. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Under the light of the street lamps, her face was so calm. Her bare face lacked the beauty of makeup, but it was still as bright and beautiful as the moon. She didn't seem to think that she had said anything extraordinary. Gu Nonli looked at her in a daze. His hoarse voice sounded a little strange in the roar of the car. You're willing to save me with your life. / You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.